Seeing Layla get dragged off like that was an unexpected outcome that they didn't plan for, but Logan knew this might be the case. There was a good chance that more unexpected things like that would happen. He hated the fact that they were in the unknown right now, and he had no information about anything. This wasn't his way of planning or doing things. Not like this. More than ever, he constantly was put on the spot and needed to make decisions instantly before obtaining all the facts. However, he was least worried for Layla out of everyone else, for she was the only one that was actually a subclass of a vampire. Her identity was harder to be revealed compared to the rest of them. A single ring of a large bell was heard, signifying that it was time for classes to begin. One ring, and then no more. The group, now having lost Layla, were making their way through the school halls, but they were now completely empty, void of students as soon as the bell had rung. The excitement and chatter that was filled everywhere just seconds ago had stopped. Hey, isn't this bad? CIA said. What are we going to do about Layla? She asked while the group continued going down the hallway, as if they were looking for something. Logan, for the most part, was concentrating on the information his little spiders were giving back to him. Right now, he was looking for some type of server room where they kept the school files. As long as they had this and he could add their names onto the list, they would be okay, even if they got into trouble for being late to the class. Don't worry about Layla. She's a strong one. She's more skilled than you know. Vorden replied, and so are you, he said in his head, knowing full well that the two of them were ex-agents of Pure. Finally, it looked like Logan had found it, although to alter it, he would need to use his own ability directly. They carried on walking through the halls until they eventually found the room that they were looking for. It was unguarded, unlike the facilities at their own school. Perhaps it was because the vampires trusted each other, or they were too scared to do anything drastic like this. Logan entered the room by himself, while Vorden and Layla continued to stay outside on guard. They looked around, but it really did seem like not a single person was late for their classes or were scanning the hallways. The silence made it a little awkward between the two of them until eventually, CIA decided to break it. Hey Vorden, do you remember who I was, before the memory loss? As she asked the question, flashing memories appeared in his head of all the strange advancement she had made towards him and all the compliments as well. Maybe Ratton enjoyed them, but Vorden certainly did not. You were a confident girl, Vorden replied. Meanwhile, Logan was in the room, which was dark inside and filled with red LED lights. There was a large terminal, one of the likes he had never seen before. This caused him to slightly hesitate after what had happened at the science lab. They can't all be like that, right? If I can't do this, then we're going to have to change everything. Placing his hand on the machine, he waited a few moments, his heart thumping loud and his palms slightly sweating, but after a few seconds, a smile appeared on his face. The machine was listening to him. After gathering information from the machine, Logan found that there weren't many students in the school at all. Altogether, there were around 500 students, and that included the other buildings as well. The other thing he found strange was there seemed to only be a single year group. It was strange indeed, but the computer only had information on the school and didn't have the reason why it was like the way it was. Hopefully soon they could find out. At first, Logan was going to add them to the class with the least students, but it turned out nearly every class had a small number of students, going up to 20 at most. The computer system was also linked to the other systems around the campus, so Logan also altered the information on the other computer as well for Layla's sake. And done, Logan said. Exiting out of the room, it was time for them to find their classroom, which was the classroom D. The halls were split into different letters depending what side they were on, and eventually they had finally found it. No longer could the three of them talk about certain matters, and they would just have to find as much information as they could on their own for now. Before they even were able to step into the room, though, a female voice was heard. Are you going to come in or stand there all day? She could tell people were standing outside. Entering the room first was Logan, with CIA and Vorden behind them. Looking around the room, the female teacher could be seen standing at the front, in front of a digital display, while all the students were sitting in their seats that went diagonally up in each row, similar to a cinema. Two of the students in the class noticed who had just come in. It was the two students who had helped them get here, Snow and Fred. Whoa, they really didn't listen to us, they're mega late. Fred whispered. I know, I wonder what the... Stop talking. The teacher shouted as she flicked her finger and threw out what looked like a little red bullet that managed to hit Snow right between the eyebrows. His head was flung backwards, and he had fallen off his chair. The teacher then turned around to look at the three in the classroom. "Now, who are you three?" she asked. "We are students of this class," Logan replied as he bowed down. "Sorry we are late." The other two quickly did the same and apologized as well. "Sorry we are late. It looks like you have manners," the teacher said, "but I'm afraid you have made a mistake. All the students are already in my class. The list has been checked, and everyone on the system is here and present. It would be best if you found your real class and let them punish you." "Is it possible you made a mistake, miss?" Logan said. Hearing the students say this, many of the students gritted their teeth together. Some felt like ducking underneath their desk in fear that the teacher was going to explode. They had all heard the rumors of how strict teachers were, and especially about this new one. She looked at the three carefully, and out of all of them, she could hear the heartbeat of the young girl the loudest. It was clear that she was frightened. "Very well, I shall check again, but let me tell you, I am thorough and can't remember the last time I made a..." But the teacher decided to stop herself there before continuing. As she went to her computer system, the three and the entire class waited in silence. And just like Logan had said, there were three names she hadn't recognized before added. "I'm sure there weren't this many students in the class when I got the schedule this morning. Did they shift around the students last second, maybe?" she thought. Leaving her computer, she walked over to the three. Not wanting to admit that there was a chance she had possibly made a mistake, she said, "It seems like there has been a last-second shift in students from the other classes, and no one cared to inform me. But due to me being wrong and you being late, I have decided not to give you any punishments. Please take a seat." There weren't many spare places left in the class, so the three of them had to sit separately from each other. CIA sat next to a couple of girls, Logan sat near the back next to a large boy, and Vorden decided to sit next to the two they had met this morning, Snow and Fred. With everything done, it was time for the real class to begin. "All right, everyone, since three people were late, I have decided to start the class from the beginning again," she said. There were no complaints or moans made from any of the students. She walked up to the digital display and wrote out her name on the board as she continued to speak. "Now, as a lot of you may know, I'm a new teacher that has decided just to start this term. I'm sure you have heard many things surrounding my family and events, but I want you to forget all of that. You are my students, and I will do my duty that has been asked of me. All of you may call me." Moving to the side, allowing the class to see the screen, written out on the digital display were the words, Silver. "Silver," she said, with the plain, straight face she always had. Not a lot of people knew why Silver had suddenly decided to become a teacher. Usually, due to the duties of a vampire knight, one was too busy to do such a thing. For some reason, though, after learning about the events of her brother, she had decided to become a teacher after coming back from Earth. For her, it was something to take her mind off. She actually realized she quite enjoyed teaching back at the military base and thought she would give it a shot here. But what was even more surprising for the others was the fact that Sliver had decided to become a normal teacher. Her rank as Vampire Knight meant if she really wanted to, she could be teaching the direct descendants of the 13 families, the next potential leaders. They often got taken out of class and were given special lessons on top of everyone else that the others weren't allowed to access. So when people found out that Silver was actually going to be teaching normal vampire students, the word had quickly spread around, especially those in Class D. Sitting in the classroom right at the back, Logan was looking at all the students and noticed a standout thing between them all. That was the fact that all the boys seemed to be in the middle of a daze while looking at the teacher as she spoke. It took Logan a while, as he didn't understand quite what was going on, as it seems like the girls weren't doing the same. Most of the girls, at least. "Okay," Silver said. "Now that my introductions are over, it's time for me to hear about yours. Please state your name and your family number. No one cares about what you like doing or what you like eating. So let's keep it short and sweet, and we can get on with this lazy introduction." She looked around the room and pointed at the boy closest. "You, up here, and you can go first," she said, as the boy walked close up and went closer to her. His face then started to turn red. It was also apparent that he was fiddling with something behind his back, and that's when he pulled out what looked like a small little red crystal. "Teacher, I know you don't know me, but I brought this for you as a gift, hoping we can get on a good start to our relationship." The boy said with his hands held out. "Thank you," Silver said as she placed the gift on her desk next to her. Silver thought nothing of this. It was normal when visiting other families and the homes of lesser vampires for them to come bearing gifts like this, although she wasn't entirely sure if it was normal for students to do so. Seeing this, Logan finally understood why all the boys were acting the way they were. When looking at Silver, it was obvious. It was because she was a beauty. The boys wanted to impress her on the first day. Although Logan wasn't really into relationships and that type of thing, he could at least tell when someone was beautiful or not, and he couldn't deny Silver's with her perfectly symmetrical looks. They say the more symmetrical someone's face is, the prettier they are. Logan thought, it seems her beauty has had quite an effect on these people. Perhaps there is a chance I can create a robot that's even more symmetrical. One with a perfect square head, a flat nose, and the eyes in the perfect spot. This will surely attract everyone. If other people were able to picture what Logan had in his mind as perfect, they would think he was a madman, or at least crazier than they already thought. "My name is Tulin Dyfond," the boy said. "I belong to the 9th family. My favorite things are—" Silver cleared her throat, interrupting the boy. "That's enough." The boy was now even more embarrassed than before and quickly went back to his seat. The introductions continued as they went around in a row, one after the other, and there seemed to be a similar pattern. All the boys had in one way or another given a gift to Silver. Some of them were red crystals, while others were special plants or items of clothing. Vorden, watching the whole thing, found it strange as well that only the boys were presenting gifts and not girls. Perhaps it was a vampire tradition that he didn't know about, and since he would be one of the first boys being called up before Logan, he would also have been the first boy to have nothing to present to Silver. "Hey, I kind of have no gift for Silver. You think that will be okay?" Vorden whispered to Fred, who was sat to his left. Fred quickly looked at Silver carefully, seeing if she was paying attention to their conversation or not. He didn't want what happened just moments ago to happen again, and that too to him rather than to Snow. "You'll be fine," Fred whispered back. "When all the boys found out about who our teacher was, we met up and decided to all go into the forest and try to get a gift for her. You know how well-known Silver is in her beauty, and she's still yet to find a man." At that moment, Silver's head twitched a little, and Fred immediately straightened up his body and looked ahead as if he had done nothing wrong. With this little information, Vorden understood a little of what was going on and why there were so many vampires rushing towards the school this morning. It was Class D. He felt a little safer now knowing he wouldn't get in trouble for bringing a gift. It was a peace in his mind, but soon that peace was ruined. "Okay, you're next," Silver said as she pointed at CIA. Although Vorden was the first boy to be called of the group, he wasn't the first one to be called of the group, and looking at CIA shaking as she got up from her seat, Vorden was incredibly worried. Perhaps Quinn was right. Maybe bringing her to this world wasn't such a good idea after all. Vorden thought. As she went up to the front, everyone noticed how much her legs were shaking. It was unusual for one to act like this. Sure, some of them were nervous, but not at this point. "My name is Bia," she said. Beforehand, they expected something like this to happen, so they told everyone to use fake names that Logan had put onto the computer. However, Logan wasn't very creative when it came to the name-calling process and decided to just change a single letter of everyone's name to start with the letter B. Even if they were to use their first names, it was unlikely that the vampires would be able to track them down, as there were many people called Vorden and Logan in the world. Their names were quite popular in today's society, but it was better to be safe than sorry and to leave no clues behind. Still, Vorden couldn't help but shake his head at the dreaded naming sense that Logan had come up with. The next part was the more troublesome part for CIA. She remembered back at the facility they had asked a similar thing. The robot had asked Vorden to declare what family he came from, choosing a random number between 1 and 13. Whatever number CIA chose, the others decided that they too would choose the same. That way, if they were often together, it would make more sense to the rest of the class. "And I come from the 10th family," she said, picking a random number. The atmosphere in the room was sudden, and Vorden managed to catch what Fred had said sitting next to him. No wonder she was so frightened when she walked up. This was the first time Fred had said such a thing, and such a strange reaction, and the atmosphere was felt in the room. "I just want to remind you all," Silver said, "that at this school, while I'm your teacher, it doesn't matter what family you come from. To me, you all are considered to be in the pooling stage. The school is a chance for you to get out of that." She then looked at CIA and placed her hand on her shoulder, as if to comfort her. "Work hard in my class, and there's a good chance you will be able to catch the eyes of the other families and make a change." The introductions continued, and the atmosphere soon turned to normal, with a few people chatting here and there, and people clapping once an introduction was complete. Then another vampire boy came up to the front. He declared his gift to Silver like the rest, and then stated his number as 10. All of a sudden it changed once again, and Silver had to remind the others to clap, as he quickly rushed off to head back to his seat. Then, finally, it came to the point where it was Vorden's turn. While walking, he started to think about whether or not he should say a different number based on the others' reaction. But they had already decided beforehand. "My name is B." B. For a second, Vorden stuttered at how ridiculous his name sounded, but he had to do it. "My name is Borden, and I'm from the 10th family." He quickly went to his seat before anyone could clap or do such a thing, and allowed the introductions to continue. "Hey, don't worry about being in the 10th family," Fred said. "We'll look after you and make sure nothing happens." Vorden knew it. Something indeed was different about the 10th family compared to all the others. But the question was, what? Finally, it was time for the last person in the class, Logan. When he came up, his introduction was quick and sweet. "My name is Bogan, and I'm from the 10th family." As he sat down, Silver could finally start her lesson. "Okay, everyone, now that the introductions are over, I thought it would be best if we did something more practical for our first lesson, and something you might all enjoy and find fun." Silver went ahead to write on the digital board, and the words read out. Lesson 001, How to Drink Blood. Hearing the name of the first lessons that the group needed to attend sent all of their brains into a panic. They read out the words slowly, just in case they were not mistaken, but it definitely said, "How to consume blood." Does this mean we might have to actually drink blood? CIA thought as she gulped down. Usually, the first day's lesson consisted of ice breaking, the students getting to know each other, or perhaps a friendly tour around the school. However, they quickly came to the realization that this wasn't a normal school. So they wouldn't be taking part in normal lessons here, such as maths and English. More so than likely, they would be learning about biology, learning a lot about the human biology. After making everyone aware of what their lesson would be for the day, Silver went ahead and led the class to one of the school gyms. As they entered, the gym was fairly large, and with only around 20 plus or so students, it felt even bigger. Straight away, though, the three of them noticed something spread out across the floor, something that almost made their stomachs churn. If it wasn't for the fact that all they had eaten were Logan's small little food pills, then perhaps they might have done. Lying there on the floor was something that could only be described as a human body. Equally spread across the floor were 5 bodies placed in a star shape. Seeing such things, the students got excited. "Whoa, are they really human bodies?" Someone asked. "I've never seen a human before. They look like us, right? Don't you think they look kind of the same?" "You idiots, of course, that's not a human body." Heading to the center of the gym, Silver picked up one of the bodies of the floor. With a small, menacing glance towards the chatty students, they immediately started to quieten down. As some of you have already figured out, this is not a real human body. Our science department has been able to create a material that replicates the way the human flesh will react almost perfectly. For a second, Logan thought that perhaps all the bodies they had seen in the glass container were also this so-called replicated flesh, but he quickly changed his mind. Quinn's system had confirmed it so, and the Wendigos surely would have been able to tell the difference. For even Logan could see there was a distinctive difference between the ones here and the ones in the glass container, and that was the smell. Real human bodies rotted. The humans were also able to create a material that would replicate the skin and organs. Doctors often used it for training, but Logan never thought he would see one in a place like this, being used like this. The bodies have also been filled with a fake liquid that is the same consistency as blood. Silver continued to explain. "For obvious reasons, on the first day, we have decided to avoid using real blood. We know some of you might not have as much control or a strong will as others, and we wouldn't be so cruel as to subject you to such things on your first day. Some of the students looked a little nervous before, and now felt a little relieved after she had said that. Many of you may never see a human in your lifetime. Some of you will have jobs that make you interact with them. Still, we need to learn the proper way if an emergency was ever to happen, to extract blood from our victims and not to be found out. Does anybody know the best way to extract blood? Silver asked as she looked at the crowd of people and eventually decided to point towards Vorden. Me. Yes, you, Vorden. Silver said. Hearing that name, wanted to make Vorden hit himself, but right now he had to come up with a good answer. Your fangs? Vorden replied, pointing to his mouth. I suppose I should have worded the question differently. Silver said, yes, the most efficient way to consume blood is using our fangs. They can easily pierce the skin while our saliva can be used to cover up the wound. But does anybody know the problem with that? She waited a few moments to see if anyone would raise their hand, but in the end, no one did. It's granted you wouldn't know. Most of you consume blood form packs that are supplied to you by your family. When we bite into our victims using our teeth, a certain hormone is released that enters the human body. This gives them an incredible pleasure similar to, as if one had taken a drug. 1 or 2 times is okay, but if you do this multiple times on a victim, then they will be seeking you out for more. You also have to be careful, as there are some people who are easily addicted. It might even just take one bite to have such an effect. So instead, Sliver then pulled out her hand and showed one finger. Her nail then started to slightly extend into a sharp point. Placing it on the dummy's forearm, she made a small cut, and the fake red, blood-like liquid followed. After placing her finger in her mouth, she covered the wound, and it slowly started to heal. This will be the contents of today's lesson. You must learn how to extend and harden your nail to easily perform a cut that can penetrate through a human skin. There are more things that you will need to learn in the future, of course, how to subdue a human without them noticing, how to clear their memories after. What are the negative effects and side effects to major memory loss? But for now, it will just be this. These dummies are extremely hard, and the material is expensive to get. So we only have 5 of them. I want you all to quickly form groups of 5 and surround yourself around one of the dummies for practice. I will be coming around to give you tips and see how you do. Do you understand? Yes, the boys shouted, while the girls had answered in a more calm manner. Groups started to quickly form, as most vampires decided to stay with people who were a part of the same family. Not everyone knew each other as the city was quite large, but most of them did due to their parents being part of the same family as well. With the 3 of them, they only needed to find 2 more, but judging by the reaction of everyone, Vorden knew it was going to be a hard one. How are we going to do this? Vorden mumbled. We're just going to be very bad at it. Logan replied, knowing he was asking about breaking the skin of the dummy. Instead of waiting around, he had already gone into recruiting mode, asking people if they wanted to join their group. But even the people that seemed to know no one didn't want to join their group, even though everyone needed 5 people. Looking around, Vorden spotted the other shy kid who also claimed he was from the 10th family. Just like them, it looked as if people were choosing to avoid him. Seeing this, Vorden decided to approach him. Do you want to come with us, Timmy, right? Yeah, that would be great, Timmy said with a smile as he was overjoyed. Seeing this and how fragile and timid he looked, it reminded Vorden of when he had first met Peter. As Logan came back to the group, he could see there was one more person, but he was sure he had asked everyone to join their group, but they had all declined. Well, they all said no. Logan said, "It's expected," Timmy replied. "After all, we're 10ths, probably no one wants anything to do with us." Vorden desperately wanted to ask Timmy what he meant by that. After all, it was the second time he had heard something like that, and it was clear the people were acting strangely towards them, but if he did ask, it would also be obvious that he himself wasn't part of the 10th family. Fred and Snow were already in a full group together, but there were still a few strays looking to join a group, but they were refusing to go to the others. So much, so that the strays were now asking if anyone was willing to swap with them. "Hey, will any of you guys be willing to do a swap?" a boy asked. "Sorry, man, we're already a." "Yeah, I'll swap," Fred said, as he left Snow and the others and decided to head over to Vorden's group. "Hey guys, I came to join you lot. I thought you were all pretty cool this morning, so I thought I would join you," Fred said with a smile. Finally, They had their group of 5, and it was time to pick a dummy. But as they all walked off to head towards the dummy closest, CIA remained there, still in her spot. Hearing Silver say something had caused her to freeze in place, the words memory loss triggered something in her mind. Vampires, they have the ability to remove memories? Didn't Layla say, we all used to be in a team together, right? And Quinn, he's a vampire? Not just any vampire, a strong one as well. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But is it possible? Did he remove my memories? When Silver was busy explaining the task and showing the others how to make a small cut, they all thought it was quite easy and simple, but it turns out it wasn't that easy at all. After trying it themselves and having a go, they found out a few things. The dummy was quite well made, and the internal structure inside was done as well. This made it more realistic, causing problems. Some of the students had grown their nails too long, and when digging in, dug far too deep, going past the skin and cutting parts they shouldn't have cut. Others found it difficult to harden their nails or make them longer. Then when trying to force a cut open, they managed to only make a faint scratch, or was damaging the dummy completely. Yuck, a boy shouted, as the fake blood splattered all over his face. You have to keep on being careful, bodies are complex things. Silver said, but this is why we practice. If you make a mistake, wait a while, put your saliva on the dummy to speed up the healing process, and try again. Please also allow the dummy to completely heal before allowing the next person to have a go. Then finally it was Logan and his group's turn. CIA had finally snapped out of her thoughts and slowly walked to the others that had surrounded the dummy. Her mind was a bit lost, and even though the others could see she was acting strangely, they didn't know why, but she had been acting strange the whole time they had been there. So it was nothing new, and they chose to let it be. Layla, she thought. I need to talk to Layla. I'm sure she will tell me the truth if I ask her, right? But what if she's in on this as well? Why didn't she tell me anything this whole time? Maybe I'm just thinking too much. First up to have a go was Fred. He even volunteered himself, knowing that the others might not be the best. I've done this a few times since my parents have shown me. They knew we would be learning this at some point, Fred said as he hardened his fingernail and then made a small cut along the forearm. It was perfect. First, you should concentrate on the hardening of the nail. If you get that bit right, then it's similar to cutting meat with a sharp knife. Fred explained as he went back and allowed Timmy to go next. His fingernail grew slightly, and straight away he had gone to try to make an incision on the dummy. But his hand was shaking, and Fred could see that he had done so in a rush, not hardening his fingernail enough. Nothing was made other than a small squiggly line looking like a snake on top of the dummy. Haha, one of the students from another group laughed. Well, we couldn't expect much from a 10th. It's not our fault. Timmy snapped back in anger. Hearing this, Silver decided to step in and whispered into the boy's ear, who then immediately went back to his work and didn't say a word past that. Don't worry about it, Timmy, Fred said. The situation behind the tents. Now not only had Vorden interested but Logan as well. Something was up, and they needed to know more if they were going to keep up this fake identity of theirs. And thus Logan had come up with an idea. It might have been strange to ask, but he thought of a way that wouldn't seem too far-fetched, especially based on all the information he had gathered so far. Fred, Logan called out to him. Can you explain to me why the tents are being treated this way? You see, my parents didn't tell me anything. They didn't inform me of the outgoings on the outside. They didn't want me involved or to know anything until when I was older. It took a few moments before Fred could reply, and he looked a little saddened before he said anything. It makes sense that your parents wouldn't want you to know. The truth is the kids here know nothing about what really happened. Neither do I, as our parents don't tell us. The only thing we do know is that out of the 13 vampire families, the 10th one is the only one without a current leader. Which also means they have no vampire knights either. There's a few vampire nobles that probably know the truth. They're the ones that run the castle and look after their people, but there aren't many. Because of this, the 10th quickly turned into one of the weakest families out of the 13. You know about the vampire pool, the vampires that are under a banner but are able to freely move between the families. Well, that's why we are told to work hard in school to get noticed by one of the 13 families. Because if no one ends up picking you, you end up getting left with the 10th family. As time went on, I guess the others looked down on those who were part of the 10th family. It's not fair, Timmy said. My parents didn't choose to be with the 10th, and now I'm stuck here as well. I don't understand. Why don't they just pick a new leader? At that point, it looked like Timmy was about to break down in tears. Seeing this, Vorden naturally went over to him. It's okay. You know the only person who is in charge of what happens to you is you. You can change whatever you want. It might be a little harder for you compared to others, but you can change it as well. Vorden said. If the words had come from someone else, then Timmy would have felt like they didn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to be part of the 10th family, but this had come from Vorden, someone who also was a 10th family member. Thank you. You might know more than me, Timmy, Fred said. But I've heard a few rumors of why they haven't chosen a new leader. The nobles are loyal to the last leader, and they have made it impossible for a new ritual to be performed to be handed over to somewhere else. Another rumor is the 10th leader is alive somewhere, but has yet to return. The last one I heard was that a new 10th leader had already been selected, but they're just trying to keep it quiet. Or the other families are doing this on purpose, waiting for a time when a new king would be selected. From the sound of things, the rumors seem to be all over the place. Logan thought that this type of thing would only happen if the ones who were in charge were trying their best to hide something. Perhaps each rumor had a little bit of truth to them all. It seemed like the vampires had their own politics in this world, just like the humans did as well, the others thought. Although on the outside everything looked well run, there was still discrimination against others even in a place like this. Hearing this piece of news, Logan thought it was quite good for them. The family situation meant they were to be treated as weak, not worth their time. If they did badly during school, they could always put it to the fact that they were part of the 10th. So when it was Vorden, CIA's, and Logan's turn to try to scratch the dummy, it came as no surprise to any of the others or even Fred that they weren't able to. He knew the members of the 10th family were unorganized compared to the others. Not just that, but it seemed demotivating. Some found it really hard that once they were in the 10th family, to try their best to work hard to get out of it. With the end of the lesson, there were no scores given for it, as it was just a practical activity that Silver wanted to do on the first day. Something more fun and active rather than her just explaining things to the others. And while looking around at the students, she felt she had done a good job. She also decided that she would keep an eye on the ones from the 10th, as it seemed like some others were targeting them, but not just those from the 10th family. She was also keeping an eye on anyone from the 13th family. The problem was, while she was a teacher, and everyone knew her position in the 13th family, if they were to do anything, they wouldn't try doing it in front of her. Okay, everyone, it's time for a break. You may now all head to the canteen for some food, before returning back to the homeroom class an hour later. Enjoy your lunch, Silver said as she walked off ahead of the students. Come on, it looks like all you 10th guys are a bit lost, Fred said. Let me take you to the canteen. But the others didn't have an appetite to go to the canteen, as they started to think about what vampires ate. The images were going through their head. Was it human flesh, eyeballs, livers, or would it just be blood? As the group headed towards the canteen, Fred decided it was best if he stayed with them. It wasn't because people in the 10th got bullied. There was no need for any of that, but they often got shunned, left to the side, or treated as extra weight most of the time. I guess some would say it was a form of bullying, but at least not a physical form. Because of this, Fred felt a little sorry for them. At least the 10ths had each other, but at the same time it appeared these guys were lost more than usual. Poor guys, especially that Logan fella. His parents had given up so much that they didn't even bother to tell him about his situation. They perhaps didn't even teach him much during the homeschooling period. Fred thought. Unlike humans who went to school from a young age, vampires were mostly taught by their families, their parents, and sometimes even by whatever courses or routines their family leaders had set up for them. Then they would go to school to learn the basics later on, and then go through the initiation of becoming a vampire adult. Entering the canteen, they could see multiple students already lined up, waiting for their food. There were then multiple long tables that fitted 26 students maximum. Each table was set up, allowing the whole class to sit together. But what caught the eyes of the others when they entered was the food. On one of the tables, another class had already arrived before them, and they could see what they were eating. In front of them, there were just various different types of meat and nothing else. The meat seemed to be cooked quite rare, but it was still cooked, and it even smelt quite nice even to them. Although it also seemed like there was nothing else but meat. There were no vegetables or carbs of any sorts. Should I tell them I'm a vegetarian? CIA thought jokingly, but of course even if one was in this type of situation they would need to eat the food just to not raise suspicion. They felt safe. However, as soon as they got closer they noticed something else, something that was by each student's side accompanied by their food. It looked like a juice packet that had been covered in plastic-like material, keeping it cold and fresh. But as they saw the students drink up, a red liquid was being shown. The others were just hoping it wasn't what they thought it was. Those packets are great, Fred said, looking at them. They only give it to us every 2 days, but it looks like they're treating us on the first day. They also keep in the smell, so anyone who's extra hungry won't start going on a rampage. With those words said, they all knew that it wasn't the tomato juice they were hoping for, but it had to be blood. After getting their food, Fred sat down with them across towards the end of the table away from the wall, and they looked at the food in front of them. All of them started off by just eating the meat first, ignoring the drink beverage by their side, while Fred was taking a sip every so often while eating as well. Still, they couldn't delay it any longer, for they had finished eating their meal, and now it was time for them to consume the drink. Radin, you're better at this than I am, right? Do you want to switch with me? Vorden thought. Hey, I like seeing blood spilt. I'm not some sicko that likes drinking blood. You got yourself into this situation, you get yourself out of it. Besides, who knows where that blood came from? If it's from a boy, you can count me out. If it's from that girl from earlier, then you might be able to convince me to take one for the team. It was now or never. Picking up the juice pouch, Logan lifted it up and started to squirt into his stomach. It was hard, but he continued to gulp it down, but it was as if his whole body was refusing to take it down, as it seemed to want to come back up with the other food he had already eaten as well. It's just tomato juice. It's just tomato juice. Trying to convince himself, he repeated these thoughts in his head, but the slightly metallic taste in his mouth was a constant reminder of what it really was. By some miracle and pure will, Vorden placed the now empty pouch back on the table and was done. Wow, you must have been really hungry, Fred said. I guess you're one of those save the best till the last kind of guys. Vorden didn't reply. In fact, he couldn't reply as he had his head held down to the floor, still trying to purge the memory of the last few seconds out of his mind, because if he didn't, there soon would be a big pile of mess in front of him. Logan looked at the pouch in front of him for a few seconds before deciding to pick it up and pass it down the line towards Fred. Here, I already had my fill today. I'm trying my best to not drink as much, Logan explained. Also, think of it as a thank you for helping us all so much. In an instant, Vorden turned his head. You little, why didn't he say that before I started drinking the BL? Blue. I could have done the same thing. It was hard to even think about what he had just done without being sick. Here you go, Timmy, CIA said as she also passed her pouch down to him. It's the same for me, I already had some this morning. As Timmy turned to look at Bia, his pupil started to widen, and for some reason she started to look pretty than before. No one had ever done something so nice to him before, to give something so precious to him. Thank you. I'll keep this and give it to my parents when I return home, Timmy said. As the group continued to talk, Timmy couldn't help but constantly look at Bia out of the corner of his eyes. However, their meal was soon interrupted by the clanging of a tray that had hit the floor. A few tables away from theirs, the tray could be seen on the floor, and a student was standing covered in blood. What the heck you do that for? The student shouted back. You traitors don't belong here. You shouldn't even be allowed to sit with us, another student said. Then a few more students from the other table stood up as well. Are you referring to our family? Traitors! We're not traitors, another yelled. Then it seems like a few students started to back up the first offender who had thrown the blood on the first student in the first place, continuing to claim that he and those from his families were traitors. The bickering had continued for a while, but the teachers who were on the side intervened and quickly settled the matter. The teachers stood there in place, watching over them as they finished their meal, making sure nothing else would happen or was being said. Are they from the 10th family as well? Logan asked, assuming it was most likely the case. What? Did you guys live your whole lives in the forest or something? Fred said, surprised. I guess there really are vampires like you who are oblivious to the politics and things going on at the moment. It was expected that something like this would happen, and why they assumed Silver has decided to come into this school as well. Apparently someone from the 13th family plotted against the other families, Not much of the details are known, but what we do know is they all found out in front of everyone. But what made it worse was the student was a direct descendant of one of the leaders, someone who was in line to become the next leader. A strange hunch was coming over Logan, but he needed to make sure. Do you happen to know the name of this student? Yeah. Fred replied. It was Fex Sanguinis. Breaking off from the others, Layla was starting to get a little worried. She didn't know who these girls were and had never met them in her life before, and all of a sudden, she was being dragged off to a separate building where she would have to take lessons all on her own. A worry was set in her mind, but not just about her, but about CIA as well. Although too soon to feel like they could call each other friends, in a way so far they had relied on each other. CIA used her as a comfort, and in return, Layla used her to feed her powers. Although she wasn't too afraid of getting caught, it did feel like a daunting task to her. As the group of girls continued to push her towards a different building, she started to get a grip on herself by breathing in and out slowly. Come on, Layla. You can do this. It's just like the first time you went to the military academy. You were on your own back then too, and it's basically the same thing. I'm just disguising myself as one of them. She hated to think about it, but her preparation with Pure and all the training did help her for situations like these. There were multiple times and scenarios she had practiced for when she needed to be fake and blend in, and in all of them, she was on her own as well. Eventually, the girls had all led her to the building. It was a few times smaller than the main one, but so were the other two buildings she also saw others go into. They entered a type of reception room before being taken down a hallway and eventually entering a classroom. What surprised her was for such a small school, the classrooms seemed to be oddly big. Just like the classrooms in the main vampire building, they were organized the same, where each row was higher than the last, and the very last row was the highest. Only the room was about 3 times bigger. When looking around, it appeared as if there were around 50 or so students already inside. And on a closer look, they all seemed a bit different. There were a couple that looked the same, but unlike the other vampires. A lot of them had distinctive features that made you realize they weren't exactly human. It would almost be impossible to hide. Looking at these, Liala was starting to be thankful that her 2 little horns on top of her head just appeared as bumps. It was easily able to be covered by moving her hair or placing a bandana on top. Right now, she could be herself though, and there was no need to worry about such a thing. Come on, let's go sit over there, the blonde-haired girl said, pointing to the front row, since all the other students had already taken up the other seats. When they arrived, though, there were 6 of them, including Layla, but there were only 5 seats present. The blonde girl had decided to go up to one of the other seats, where a boy was sitting. Hello there, do you mind moving so me and my other friends can sit here? The boy looked over at the blonde girl, before looking over at the other girls as well. He then noticed one of the girls with small little bumps on top of her head. Layla, I'll move, if you let me go out with her, the boy said, pointing at Layla. The blonde girl started to laugh and had a smile on her face, but a few seconds later, and a fist came down on top of the boy's head. I said move, she shouted, and the boy, not wanting to get hit again, quickly left and moved to another seat. Girls are scary, he cried as he went away. The 6 girls sat together, allowing Layla to sit in the middle and the blonde girl sitting next to her. I almost forgot my manners. My name's Amy, by the way. Nice to meet you, she said with a smile. Layla smiled back, but honestly, she was having a hard time telling whether Amy was a good person or not. When the boy had pointed at her and looked her way in a certain way, a creepy feeling was felt inside her. It wasn't a usual way someone looked at a person, at least not a way she had felt. Because of this, she didn't really know what she wanted to say to the boy, but it looked like Amy had dealt with him already. She's strong-willed at least. Reminds me a little of Aaron. Layla thought. Amy, can I ask, how do I know this is the classroom I'm meant to be in? Layla asked. Did you not read the information they gave you? I know it was a bore to do. My tutor made me do it, saying it would help me. Anyway, it's because this is the only class in the whole school. As you know, there aren't many of us C-class type subclasses. On top of that, there aren't enough of them to go to school. Actually, some years they don't even bother doing classes, and tell the subclasses to wait until there are enough students. Amy explained. Finally, the teacher walked in, who looked like quite the handsome man. He himself looked just like any other human and had short hair with round glasses on his face, while wearing a nice suit. "Hello there, everyone. I'm Professor Phil, and I will be your teacher for this semester. Now, before we start, I want to take a good look at you all and see what we have," Phil said as he started to walk around the classroom and went up and down the rows. "I see we have a succubus here," Phil said, pointing to one of the students. "Oh, a banshee, and a witchess over there." Then when going back to the front of the class, he noticed one of the girls looking down as if she was avoiding eye contact with him. That's when his eyes started to light up, and he held out his hand. "Do you mind coming up to the front, pretty miss?" Phil said. For some reason, Layla found it hard to say no to the teacher, as if his smile was pulling her in. So instead she nodded as she was led to the front of the classroom with everyone else. As you all know, it's quite pointless for us to do introductions. Subclasses have no choice when joining a family because they have to follow the person who turned or created them, but that doesn't mean you aren't special. There will be times when you must work with others in your family, or maybe other vampires completely, and that includes each other. Phil explained. So it's important that we learn each trait of as many C classes as we can. So, I will ask, does anyone know what was your name? Phil asked. "Layla," she replied, still being embarrassed as everyone started to stare at her. When going into the computer system, Logan had added Layla to the system as well, but was careful not to change her name. After all, he was unable to tell her unless he used the mask to tell her what her new name would be. But if Vorden was here, he would have told Layla that she was lucky to not be called Bayla. "Can anyone please tell me what Layla is?" A few students had put their hand up, and that included the girls at the front. It seemed like more of the girls knew the answer to the question than the boys. Selecting one student, Phil waited for the answer. "Ahanya," the boy replied. "Excellent. So, as you know, here we have Ahanya. Now I want to tell you how special this is. It's very rare to see a subclass like this. Do you know why?" This time, when asking the question, Phil didn't give the others the chance to answer and continued to explain. Because Ahanya is the only known vampire class that is able to switch between evolutions on the fly. They have a total of 3 evolutions that they can choose from, and depending on the situation they are in, they are able to change. On top of this, each evolution has a different set of abilities that would be better in different scenarios. They don't just stay in one state, but are able to change into these different states at will. Although after a certain amount of time, they will always go back down to the original state like the one that you see here in front of you. "Thank you, Layla. Please sit down." Layla quickly ran off and sat back down in her seat. Phil went on and started selecting more random students to come to the front. He would then do the same as he did with her, explaining a little bit of detail about each type. But Layla was far too distracted to focus, as she was busy thinking about what she had just heard from him. It was possible for her to evolve right now. Yet so far she hadn't done so once. Perhaps coming to this school might drastically be exactly what she needed. The first lesson in the morning had taken quite a while for Layla, a lot longer than she thought it would take. Phil, the class teacher, had nearly gone ahead and introduced every different C-type class he could find in the room. And it turns out there were many. There were even a couple that looked to be the same type, but it turned out they were different. Although going through all this, Layla actually didn't find any bit of it boring. As he spoke, it was as if the words were floating right into her ears, and she was trying her best to pay attention to every detail that was spoken. She had learned a lot that she never knew about herself and the others during that class. The bad news was Phil was only able to explain the basics of everything. He was quite a knowledgeable teacher, but when it came to certain questions about each different type, he would be a little hazy, which was to be expected with how many different types there were. But it wasn't too much of a problem. For the first day for them was all about learning about themselves. There was a library located in their building that had information of each subclass of vampires related to the category C. The first lesson had gone on for a long time, and it was now time for lunch. But when they were to return, their tasks were to find out information about themselves. Because some of the texts used complicated language, Phil would be there to help them explain anything they needed. Layla couldn't wait to return to class. It was a completely different feeling to when she was at military school. She always found the lessons a pain or a bore, but she was enjoying herself here. So far anyway. It reminded her when she was younger and used to read books about these things, wishing something like this would happen, and now it really was happening to her. When lunch came, they were allowed to go outside and enjoy the scenery as they ate. What Layla didn't realize was they were all meant to bring in their own lunch to school. Because each person's diet was specific, usually an allowance would be set aside and sent back to the family for them to support the C-type subclasses. The class was outside behind the school, where there were many benches and a few trees. Although it still looked strange to Layla that everything was so dark. It was as if she was attending school at night time. Amy and the other girls had brought out a picnic mat and decided to sit underneath one of the trees. They then all brought out their packed lunches. In a way, Layla was happy that Amy had approached her and been so nice. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known what to do, and it looked like Vorden and the others weren't eating outside, or at least not at the same time. The girls continued to chat and talk, and that's when Amy noticed Layla wasn't eating anything. "Did your Turner not give you any food?" Amy asked. Later, Layla found out that the term Turner was used to describe the person who had originally turned a human into what they had become today. At one point, there were only vampires, and when a vampire would turn a human, there was a chance they could fall into one of the subclasses. Some subclasses could have children, but even their children would work for the original person that turned their parents. So whenever one would talk to someone as their Turner, they were talking about the original vampire that had turned them or their family. In most cases anyway, only at the vampire noble stage due to law would they be able to turn a human. So they and their subclasses would most likely stay in the same family. Seeing Layla with no food, Amy offered a part of hers, and it looked like a completely normal dish, with some rice, veg, and meat. Layla had been eating the food pills, and although she didn't feel hungry, it just wasn't the same as gouging out on a big meal. It was incredibly hard for her to say no, and the two started eating while talking away. She really is a nice person after all, Layla thought. The conversation between the girls naturally started to move on to one thing, and that was the boys. They were talking about if anyone in their current class had caught their eye, and then they eventually moved on to Layla. "So, Layla, is there anyone you like?" another girl asked. "There must be, right? You're so popular all the boys already have their eye on you, so you need to be careful." Another said, "They are?" Layla replied, confused. Layla never considered herself as ugly, but at the same time she was never one of the popular girls at school or at the pure base. Honestly, she never had the time to worry about girly things like that. And now that she had two small horns that looked like bumps, she thought that quite possibly she would never get a boyfriend. Still, she started to think about the question quite deeply and was wondering if there was anyone she liked. "Not anyone in the class," Layla said quietly. Amy snapped her fingers as a thought came to her head. "I know. You were walking with those 3 vampire boys earlier, weren't you? I remember there was that tall, hot blonde as well, although he was a little shy." "Who them?" Layla said. No, not one of them. Although, there were times when Vorden was nice to me. We didn't get along at first, but he slowly started to get better." She thought. "Wait," another girl said. "If it's not them, and the reason why you don't want to tell us, is it because it's your Turner? Were you turned directly by him?" "Yeah, that has to be the case. I hear that a lot of humans who were turned by vampires, it was because they fell in love," another girl replied. Images of Quinn started to appear in her head, and her face started to heat up and her cheeks started to redden. She ducked her head into her knees, wishing to hide the embarrassment. "Well, that case has been solved. Well, if you were turned directly, then it might actually make some of the boys weary of you. So see that as a good thing," Amy said. "Anyway, if you were turned, who was it? It had to be a vampire noble, right? Or maybe even higher?" Not knowing how to reply or what to do, Layla was trying to think of an answer. She didn't know any vampire names, and she couldn't exactly tell them all it was Quinn. But just then a commotion seemed to be happening behind them. "Oh no, not him," Amy mumbled. "Layla, keep your head down, okay?" Not sure what was going on, Layla decided to do as she was asked. It didn't feel at this point that Amy would try to do anything to harm her. Well, look at all the pretty girls," a boy's voice said. "It was right for me to come over to the C campus. After all, you have the most and best-looking girls in the school." For some reason, Layla had noticed this too. The C-type subclasses were mainly female. In the classroom, over 70% of them were girls while the rest were boys. Perhaps that also had something to do when her evolution path was being chosen. "Xander, shouldn't you be at the main building right now? Lunch is nearly over," Amy said. "Oh, Amy," Xander said as he played with his hair a little, making sure it was perfect. "You grow more beautiful by the day. I decided to see if some of your friends here would care to accompany me after school today. Besides, I get away with more than I should, being the most promising student of the school and all." The girls started to whisper to each other as they now realized who Xander was. He was one of the vampires that belonged to the first family, one of the most skilled, and had been invited to also learn their family's ability. They soon realized why he had so much confidence, and it would be good for the girls to get on his friendly side. However, Amy too belonged to the same family. Although her Turner was a different person, they had spent a lot of time growing up together, and she never did like the arrogant air he seemed to show. "Oh, and who's this pretty girl I haven't seen yet? Would you care to turn around?" Xander asked. So far, Layla had been looking in the other direction while sitting underneath the tree, and right now she didn't know what to do. It would be strange not to turn around when someone calls you, right? What's the worst that could happen? As she turned around and Layla's face was in view, something had struck deep in Xander's heart. He gripped his hand over his chest and started to fumble as if he had been hit by an arrow. Those cute little horns, the white soft skin, and that innocent look in your eyes, Xander said. At this point, Amy wanted to stop it, but there were some things that she couldn't do. Being part of the same family, and Xander being in a higher position than her, if she was to try to do anything, she would get into serious trouble. In his excitement, Xander went forward to grab both of Layla's hands, bringing them close together. "Please, go out with me," Xander said, but the whole thing was too overpowering for her. She had never let someone get this close to her, in her personal space so suddenly without knowing them. She quickly wiggled her hands free and moved back, and as if on instinct she placed both her hands out. Spiritual chains. The black ball came out fast, hitting Xander around the body, tying him up in an instant. "Good one, Layla," Amy said as she had now grabbed Layla's hand. "Come on, let's get out of here." All the girls quickly followed as they headed back to the C campus. Xander could do nothing but wait for the chains to go away as he watched the girls run off. "So you have a little bit of a bark to you. That just makes things better. I will make you mine. It would be an honor for someone like you to go out with me." After lunch had ended, Vorden and the others started to head back to their classroom. They left earlier than the others as it seemed like the tables that were involved with what had happened were asked to stay behind for a telling off. Well, at least they seemed to have better discipline than in our military base, Vorden thought, but perhaps things would get better once they returned. After all, Duke had been impacted greatly, and it might have changed him for the good. Also, judging by Nathan's reaction, there seemed to be something else going behind the scenes, as Vorden had thought. While heading back through the hallway, the group seemed to be witnessing something happening not too far from their class. "Hey, you're from the 13th family, aren't you?" the boy said. It appeared that one of the boys was being aggressive to another and had him pinned up against the wall. The boy who was acting as the aggressor was a bit of a pretty boy. "Xander, my family honestly didn't know what was going on with Fex. We really didn't know. That's why it was decided to strip him of all his titles and relation to the family. So things like this wouldn't happen," the boy said. Although the boy being pinned up against the wall didn't know it, Xander had a different reason for holding a grudge against the 13th family, unlike everyone else. Because of Fex, an unknown white had beaten him in battle. He had been embarrassed in front of the leader and quite possibly ruined his chances for moving up into the main family. Instead of blaming the person who had beaten him, he was blaming Fex and his family. On top of that, he had just had a run-in with a strange girl outside, who had made him feel even weaker, and he needed to let off some steam. Noticing that the student was part of the 13th family made him the perfect target for him. "That doesn't change the fact that you all could have been plotting something," Xander said. The back and forth continued, and Fred, seeing this, even pulled a sour face. "Come on, let's go to class." But as Fred turned the corner to head to class, he noticed that someone else had continued to walk forward. The bickering between the two continued, and it seemed like it had reached boiling point. Pulling back his fist, Xander was ready to release his stress on the student in front of him. Just as the fist was thrown out, another had come outward and pushed the weight of his hand at just the right place and time, so the punch had hit the wall behind him. When looking at who had just done such a thing, he could see a pretty blonde boy to his right. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Vorden asked. He couldn't help himself and get involved, After all, he was getting horrible flashbacks of what happened to Peter. It seemed like even with the teachers intervening, there were still those that were treated as above the rest. Vorden could just tell Xander was the type to not care. Otherwise, why would he do something like this in the open? Why would Fred choose to ignore it? It was because he felt like he was above the rules. In his right hand, Vorden held the black sword. Not because he was going to use it to attack, but to activate the skill to give him the strength needed to push the fist aside. Looking at the weapon, Xander chuckled. Ha! Who the hell is this nobody that uses beast weapons to fight? If you had any faith in your strength, you wouldn't use such a thing. Xander replied. At this point, Xander was getting ready for a fight, and Logan was right there behind him, ready to support Vorden if anything was too serious. However, just then, Silver seemed to have come down the hallway, and her eyes were staring at Xander like daggers. She noticed the boy he had pinned up against the wall, and could guess what was happening. Seeing this, Xander tooted and decided to head back to his class. Because he technically hadn't done anything to the student, there was nothing that Silver could get him for anyway. He and her both knew this. Still, that didn't stop her into staring deep into Xander's soul as he walked away. She continued to look at him until he walked back into his classroom. Damn, that bit *H is scary, Xander thought as he shook off the shivers and goosebumps off of his mind. The young boy quickly said thank you to Vorden before heading back to his own class. Thank you, Vorden. Not many would be brave like you to go up against Xander like that. Silver said. No worries, Vorden replied as he put his sword away back on his back. I just hate seeing crap like that. Returning back to their school building, when entering inside, Amy had finally stopped running and let go of Layla's hand. She could see the relief on her face had just appeared, but still she seemed to be concerned about something. As she turned around, she went to look at Layla and started to smile. That was a good one, Amy said, giving a wink. That Xander still flaunts himself like he's some big shot. I thought his apparent loss would bring him down a peg or two, but then they decided to keep it a secret from everyone. And he's still the same as he always is. What do you mean? Layla asked. Oh, don't worry, I was just mumbling to myself, Amy replied. But seriously, that guy is a perv. Do you best to stay away from him. Unfortunately, because we are part of the same family, I can't really do much, and the other girls won't be able to stick up to him either. Amy then went in to whisper in her ear. Actually, they might even turn on you to get on his good side. She whispered. But if anything happens, then it might be best to tell your Turner. I'm sure he's strong enough to sort him out. Although Layla was not too sure. She had no clue how strong the regular vampires were. The only two she had ever seen fights were Quinn and Fex. If Layla was in trouble with the top student at school, would Quinn really be able to beat him? She thought. With the strange encounter over, the group decided to head back to class as promptly as possible. Inside the class, Phil was already waiting for them. Once all of the kids had returned, a quick head count was done. After that, it was time for them to head to the library. The task was already explained beforehand, so when they entered, they were allowed to go ahead and try to find as much information as possible. The library wasn't very large, and there was only a total of around 6 shelves with books on them. But then when thinking about it, this was all the information they had on C subclasses, which meant there was quite a lot of information there if they thought about it further. The girls split up, as they too were interested to find out as much as they could about themselves. After all, sometimes their Turners didn't know much either. Even Quinn was only able to give Layla basic information about what she was. Going through the library was quite easy since it turned out they were sorted out in alphabetical order. When going to the H section, she then needed to look for anything to do with her type, and it turned out there was only one book she could find. She looked at the front, and the book was titled, The Truth About Hanya. When looking down at who had written it, she noticed that the name at the bottom had been scratched off. She found it odd, and just to be sure picked up another book next to it. But this one was completely fine, and said the name of the author like every other book seemed to do. Still, for now she decided she would start to read it. The book wasn't very big, and mainly just had details about the Hanya themselves. The first one was about the regular Hanya, the Hanya Naminari. This was what Layla currently was. All the information that was written in the book was exactly as both Quinn and Logan had described. This made her feel confident that the contents of the book were accurate. Then when moving on to the next page, information on the second stage evolution was shown. Chunari Hanya, a mid-level vampiric demon. They have long, sharp horns, tusks like fangs, and more powerful magic. Reading the description of the evolution was actually upsetting Layla even more. From the sound of things, it seemed like she would look even uglier than she did now if she was to evolve. The only saving grace was each evolution was temporary, and she would always revert back to the Nominari form. Although as she continued reading, it seemed like they did have more powerful magic and more spiritual spells, but didn't go into much detail. The next page had the next evolution, which was called Hanari Hanya. These have serpentine bodies and the ability to breathe fire. They are fast and agile, having a lot of durability in this form, but can no longer perform spiritual spells. No. Does this mean I'll look like a snake woman if I turn into this? There is no way I'm ever going to evolve into that, Layla thought. Then finally, as she turned the last page, there seemed to be a small bit of writing, but nothing else. The fourth form of the Hanya has yet to be recorded down. My research has only taken me this far, and unfortunately there aren't many to observe. Although I have a friend who is willing to help me, so the information on this shall be written down in a second book. After reading this, Layla closed the book and noticed it looked quite old, and then there was a publication date. It was almost written 100 years ago. Shouldn't the second book be finished by now then? She thought. But when looking and looking, there was nothing she could find. Instead, she decided that perhaps if she was to search by the author, she might find something. So taking the book, she decided to head off to Phil, who was standing in the center of the library watching over all the students. Sir, I was wondering if you know who wrote this book. I'm trying to see if there was anything else he wrote. Layla asked. Oh, let's see. Phil replied, taking the book off her. Immediately, he noticed that the author's name had been scratched out. Actually, Layla, the scratched-out author's name means the book wasn't even meant to be in here in the first place. Maybe it slipped through because you're the only Hanya we have had in a long time. Phil said with a smile. Oh, but then do you know who wrote it? She asked again. Unfortunately not, he said with a smile. As Layla walked away, knowing there was nothing else she could do, she decided to try to look at other books about subclasses that were similar to hers. The scratched-out name, I guess that means it belongs to him. I wonder how long it will be until you have been completely written out of the vampire history books. Phil thought. Even your legacy continues now, as these buildings were all founded because of you. The rest of the day, there wasn't really much to be done. Since it was the first day, the students were just given their schedule of what they would learn for the rest of the semester. The group took a quick look at it, and there didn't seem to be any worrying details on there. Well, at least not anything too worrying for how long they were planning to stay there. And with that, the school had ended earlier on its first day than it usually would. Students were encouraged to interact with each other and continue exploring the school, but they weren't to leave the campus. They could explore the library, check out the training area, and even pop into the other classrooms. In each building, there were living quarters, since the school was only open for 2 months during the summer. In a way, the school was treated as a summer camp for all the vampire families. While for most of the year, they would be taught by their own family. They were to stay there and learn every day until they were eventually sent back to their families, where they would continue their learning process and training. They would then be invited again at the end of the year to take the final examination to see if they were able to become an adult vampire. There weren't any details about what this exam was, but since it didn't concern Vorden and the others, they were not really interested in it anyway. As they left the classroom, the group had split up a little. The boys' and girls' dorms were separated, and during class they had all been given a key card with their room number. CIA immediately said to the others that she would be going to get some rest. The others didn't mind this because she looked absolutely drained. In a short amount of time, she had gone through a lot. The experience of what the boys went through and what she had gone through couldn't be compared. They were slowly introduced to everything. She had instead been thrown in on the deep end, and they couldn't really blame her for feeling the way she did. However, Vorden still felt like she had been a little quieter than usual for some reason. Apart from what she had just said as they were about to leave the classroom, she hadn't spoken or asked anything about what they planned to do. As the boys were just about to leave the class as well, Silver decided to give a bit of warning to Vorden, stopping and calling out to him. For what you did earlier, I just want to give you a little warning. Silver said, the boy you stopped before, he's one of the head teacher's favorite pupils, and he's linked to the first family. Usually I would say there's nothing to worry about, but you see, you being in the 10th family means that even if they do target you, you don't really have any protection. While I'm around, he won't really do anything to hurt you. I promise you that. You protected my family, so I will protect you. But I can't keep an eye on you the whole time. I would suggest for today you head back to your room, Silver said as she went back inside her classroom. Listening to Silver's advice, Vorden knew it was important that they didn't cause any trouble. They were more at risk than anybody. If he was to get into a fight with a vampire, he couldn't imagine not taking a hit, and taking a hit means spilling blood, revealing his identity to everyone. At the time, he wanted to not get involved in anything, but his body was moving before he knew it. Just go, Logan said. No one is after me, so I'll be fine. Besides, I'm more careful than any of you lot, anyway. I'll try to get some information about what happened to Fex, and try to find out more about the tents. With that, the three of them had split up, but would be soon joining each other again. Spreading his little spiders out, and heading to the library himself, Logan tried to gather as much information from as many different sources as possible. After a few hours of research, from gossip, books, and some old articles on the computer system, Logan was starting to get an idea of the structure of the place. Before returning to his room, he decided he would stop by Vorden's first. There are a few things I found out I thought you'd want to hear, Logan said, stepping inside the room. The room wasn't the same size as Logan was used to, but it was a similar size to the standard military rooms apart from there only being one bed and no one required to share. The decorations were also a little darker, to say the least. The floors were made out of wood but dark wood, while the bedpost and frames had twirls on the post, giving it that Victorian fancy feeling. Shouldn't we tell CIA this as well? Vorden said. I assume she has too much on her mind. Besides, she's not really interested in helping Fex out and Peter anyway. Logan replied. She's only here because of Layla in the first place. First, the school building is split up into 4 campuses, this one that we are in which is for the vampires, then the other 3 for the vampire subclasses. Category A are those closely related to vampires, Category B, the undead, and Category C, those strong at magical abilities. Right now, Layla should be at Campus C. It looks like she will be safe in there for now, so we have nothing to worry about. Logan explained. There are a total of 15 castles altogether. There is the main castle, which is the largest one in the center. This castle is where the so-called Vampire King resides. Then there are 7 castles on either side of it. These castles belong to the so-called vampire leaders. If you remember, when everyone was introducing themselves, everyone said a number. This is what it's related to. They all work for the Vampire King. Also, each family seems to have a special ability that only that family knows. An example of this is Fex's string ability, belonging to the 13th family. Wait a minute, Vorden said, but I didn't hear anyone say a number above 13? This was what got me a bit confused as well. Logan replied. The only information I could find was 2 of the castles seemed to be practically empty and completely abandoned. One of these is castle number 10. We now know why. Thanks to Fred, it's due to the leader who had gone missing. And then there is the 14th castle. Unfortunately, it seemed like I could find nothing about this castle. Inside the castle, those that are related by blood or are connected live inside the castle. Other than direct descendants, there is no one weaker than a vampire noble inside them. All of these know how to use the vampire ability. Then on top of these, there are 100 more who also know how to use the ability, but aren't really related by blood. They live not too far away from the castle. Each vampire family has a total of 1,500 people. The rest of the vampires that don't belong to the 2 groups mentioned above live all over the city. Most of them don't ever learn an ability with hopes of one day being promoted and moving up to the top 100 within their family. Knowing the structure of the vampires was starting to scare Vorden a little, who knew how strong the vampire leaders or the vampires inside the castle were. So if Fex is a part of the 13th family, then most likely he's in the castle at the moment. Maybe Peter as well. Vorden asked, thinking about the possibility that they would have to fight around 50 vampires to get Peter and Fex out of there. This information was almost impossible to find. It seems like everyone knows about Fex, but at the same time doesn't. They just know he had done a bad deed worthy of an execution. And as for Peter, Nobody knows anything. If I was to take a guess, I would say they have them both at the 13th castle, but we can't move until we get more information. Perhaps as days go past, more information will start to spill. I'll keep one of my spiders in each room and see what they bring. The day had come to an end, and the three tried their best to sleep, but it was nearly impossible. Vorden was starting to think that this whole rescue mission was a lost cause. Sure, Quinn was strong, but to possibly go against all these vampires, it just didn't seem like a sane thing to do. They had pulled off many operations before against big players like True Dream and during the event, but this just seemed like it was on a completely different level. As for CIA, she was starting to convince herself more and more about the possibility that a vampire had removed her memories, and the only vampire she knew of that was apparently close to her at the time was Quinn. She wanted answers, and she wanted them soon. Going up the stairs, one step at a time, Quinn could feel his heart racing. Looking at the dark sky, he knew he was in the right place. Not quite belonging here, but at the same time, something just seemed a little familiar to him. He didn't know if it was just in his head, or perhaps it was the vampire side calling out to him, but he didn't feel out of place or scared. As he reached the top, he had finally pressed his foot on solid ground, and it looked like he had finally reached outside. When turning around to look at what he had come out from, he could see the staircase with the slanted door going slightly underground, looking like a bunker. As for where he was, he had no idea. There was a forest with dark gray leaves and the sky, from which his direction he could only see a single moon out. "Is this the vampire world?" Quinn asked. "It certainly looks like it," the system replied. "What do you mean?" Quinn said. "I thought you said the vampires originally lived on Earth." "I did, and what I said was the truth, but we had established our own separate place. Designed for us, and the trees you see here were something that could only be found in that special place. I'm starting to wonder how they managed to move everything over." Only knowing that he was in the forest, Quinn decided to see if he could try to get up high to some vantage point. Looking at the trees around him, he went and tried to find the biggest and tallest tree. Most of them were the same size, but if he got to the top, he should be able to see quite far, especially with his vision. It didn't take long, and scaling the tree with his strong hands was quite easy. Jumping from branch to branch, making his footsteps as light as possible, like a monkey, he had finally reached the top and could look outward. Behind him there was a large mountain that looked to be a couple of miles away. Then on the other side he could finally see it. The large castle that stood in the middle and the several other castles that surrounded it. The vampire settlement. "It's a lot bigger than I thought," Quinn said. For some reason Quinn had in his head that the vampires were a sort of selective small group. Maybe there were only 13 households of families, but looking at this, it was an entire large city. Before Quinn had asked the system questions about this, but truthfully the system said it didn't know and didn't want to give an unrealistic expectation. The system seemed to mumble quietly. "It's the same. It's exactly the same as it was when I remembered it before, but how is that possible? If you don't know, how do you think I'm meant to know?" Quinn replied. Now, seeing how large and grand the city was, Quinn thought perhaps the best thing to do wasn't to go straight to the city. Using one of his masks, he decided he would send out a message to the others to see if they would reply. But after waiting a while, there was nothing. Closing his eyes, he could feel the connection with Layla, and it seemed she was safe. As for Peter, for some reason, even though they were on the same planet, he could feel nothing. But he wouldn't let that dishearten him. The system had reassured him that if he was put into the cells, then they would purposely try to block the connection. This way nobody would know where he was and attempt the very thing they were trying to do. "We still have time then," Quinn said. Looking around, still at the top, he decided to see if he could do something else. Perhaps there were some type of beasts he could kill to gain EXP. Before going to the city and doing anything, he would have liked to at least have been at the vampire noble level, and his level up was now extremely close. There was the mountain, but it seemed to be in the opposite direction of the city, and he didn't want to stray too far, especially if he thought the others were in trouble, and he could feel something happening to Layla. When looking around, he spotted an area that seemed to have fewer trees than normal. Listening carefully, he could also hear the sound of running water not too far. All living things, even beasts, needed water to live, so most likely there would be beasts around that area. Quickly, Jumping from tree branch to tree branch, he made his way to the running water, until eventually he had reached his destination. It looked like a river, and it was clear blue like regular water. There was nothing strange about it, and the water seemed to be coming downstream from somewhere. Still, he carefully waited in the trees to see if there was anything he could spot. Eventually, soon there appeared what looked like a little white bunny with a horn on top of its head. It hopped over to the water and slowly looked around to see if there was anything there. Then it popped its mouth into the water and started to lick the water away. Well, it might not give much EXP, but at least it's something, Quinn thought. But before doing anything, Quinn decided to wait a little. After all, there was a chance a bigger prey might come for the bunny. That's when he started to notice unusual movements in the water. But it was a little too late, as then a loud snapping sound was heard, and black blood splattered in the beast's mouth. The little rabbit was unable to react, and all Quinn could now see out of the water was a strange crocodile, snake-looking creature. It had the normal body of a crocodile while the neck of the snake. Then when it came to the head part, it returned to that of a crocodile with its powerful jaws but with the tongue of a snake. It was certainly an odd-looking creature that he had never seen before. Now that should give me some good EXP, Quinn thought. The snake crocodile had gone back into the river, and that left Quinn with thinking of the best way to lure the beasts out of the water and killing them. While thinking about it, he saw another horned rabbit appear. Perfect. However, there wasn't just one horned rabbit. Soon after, another appeared from the trees, and another. Eventually, it seemed like there was a whole army of them. Then finally, behind the 20 or so rabbits, a single black horned rabbit appeared, although it looked different compared to the rest. A black type of smoke appeared around its body, and its eyes were red. A spiral pattern could be seen across its feet, going up towards its neck, and its body was roughly double the size of the others. The black rabbit started to make a few squeals, and the other rabbit started to move in towards the river. It was clear just from watching this that the black rabbit was the leader of the other rabbits. The white rabbits then stood just at the edge, waiting while the black rabbit stood slightly behind them, and was bent over on its fours with its horn pointed outward. Then, the movements in the water could be seen once again. Finding the whole thing interesting, Quinn decided to continue to watch the development. Just what exactly were the strange rabbits doing? It was rare to see beasts have some sort of intelligence unless they were ones of the high level, or the humanoid type like the king-tier beast before. Then, the beast had snapped up once again, and this time the rabbits were ready. Jumping backwards at the right time, the beast's head had bitten nothing but thin air. Once avoiding the strike, all the rabbits had jumped on the beast's neck, pinning its head on the ground while part of its body remained in the water. Suddenly, the horn on top of the black rabbit's head started to trickle slightly as it lit up in a blue color. Little sparks started to come off the horn, as if it was charging up. Its red eyes started to glow. Out from the black rabbit's mouth a squeal was heard, and the white rabbits reacted once again, letting go of the beast's head. It flung up in the air, and at the precise moment, a single bolt from the black rabbit's horn came shooting out, piercing a large hole in the crocodile beast's head. It stood no chance from the attack and immediately fell into the water, drifting down the river dead. Wait, why did the rabbits kill the beast? Was it just for revenge on the first rabbit? If that's the case, then these rabbits are really clever beasts, especially the black one. Looking at the black rabbit, Quinn used his inspect skill. Inspect. Black-horned rabbit. Class. Familiar. New quest received. Defeat the rabbit for an instant level up. This was the second time he had seen a familiar-like creature, and it was the level-up reward he needed. As soon as the strange water creature was killed, at first Quinn thought it was for something as simple as petty revenge. But watching it for a little while longer, he thought that maybe there was more to it than that. Now that he had received his new quest, he knew he was going to kill the rabbit, even though it had done nothing to him. Usually, he wouldn't do this type of thing, even to beasts. Nearly 99% of beasts were hostile towards humans for some reason, but there were a few expectations. But this was a desperate time, and desperate times needed desperate measures. He would kill a 1,000 black rabbits without a second thought, if it was for the sake of him getting stronger, so he could save his comrades. Still, it looked as if the black rabbit was continuing to do strange actions. It started to head downstream and followed the river along, and the army of rabbits followed behind it as well. Every so often it would stop, and it looked as if the rabbits that were following it along were starting to slow down and go off doing their own things. Whenever this was to happen, the black rabbit would start squealing again, making high-pitched noises, and the white rabbits would get back in line and continue to follow the black leader. It was hard to tell if it was an ability or if they were just listening to the leader. The most strange thing about these creatures, though, was that Quinn couldn't tell if they were beasts or not. When using his inspect skill, there was no such beast ranking. This was the same for the Wendigo-type creatures. It's because they are familiars and not beasts. The system replied. The vampire world is deeply connected with the familiars world and often opens up rifts, sending them into ours. Just as not all vampires are able to have familiars, not all familiars can form contracts either. As you can see, that black rabbit is a little special. We still do not yet know what allows them to evolve. Although it was interesting learning about this stuff, Quinn didn't really care about it. The only reason he was being cautious was because he couldn't tell how strong the white rabbits and the black rabbits were. After continuing to follow them for a while, he saw that they had eventually reached the creature that had been defeated. It was being blocked by a strange-looking dam made out of trees. Although the water could continually flow, the strange tree-made dam was able to catch other things. The rabbits then hopped along with the trees, and the black rabbit reached the creature starting to do something. But Quinn couldn't quite see as it wasn't that clear. After a few moments, inside the black rabbit's mouth, there was a beast crystal, and a clear one at that, which made Quinn guess that the beast they had defeated was at the intermediate level. If he was to take a guess, having the power to control the other rabbits, on top of using his strange lighting horn, would put the rabbit at around the advanced level. Not 100% sure, but now knowing this new information, he certainly felt a lot more confident about facing the thing. However, he continued to follow the rabbit, wondering just what it would do with the crystal. They crossed the dam, and staying a good distance away, Quinn then crossed it himself later. Following them through the forest, it appeared they had finally left the forest area and entered a new area. Still, he made sure to be aware of where he was and where the city was. This area was covered in strange stones. The flooring had changed to a pebble-like feeling, and there were also many large rocks. Finally reaching what looked like a fairly large cliff wall, the bunnies had entered a cave. Perfect, Quinn thought. Not only would he find out why and where they had taken the beast crystal, but also quite possibly this was their home base. As Quinn took a peek inside the cave from the side, he could see that the cave didn't go too deep in, and there didn't look to be any paths. But what did surprise him was the number of glowing crystals he could see. There was a pile of beast crystals lumped in the back, and the black rabbit had dropped the current crystal in his mouth on top of the mound. There must be about 150 crystals in there. Most of them looked to be at the intermediate level, but it was hard to tell if there was anything higher due to them all being piled on top of each other. With only one entrance in and out, the bunnies were trapped, and quite possibly this gold mine was all his. Entering the cave and seeing all the bunnies, Quinn was ready. Not wanting to give them a chance, he opened up his palm. Blood spray. His hand slightly flung backwards, and a shotgun-like spray of blood had hit most of the white rabbits, while the black rabbit hopped over behind the pile of crystals. Some of the crystals went flying, hitting the back of the cave wall, but beast crystals were as strong as diamond and hard to break. They often could only be melted at extremely high temperatures. First white-horned rabbit killed. 200 EXP gained. White-horned rabbit killed. 100 EXP gained. White-horned rabbit killed. 100 EXP gained. White. The messages had appeared at least 20 times, giving him a good chunk of EXP. 35090/51200 experience points. Still, it wasn't enough, and if he wanted to do anything, he would need to kill the black rabbit. Suddenly, though, as Quinn went to move forward, a blue stream of lightning had come out, and at the last second, he managed to move his head, allowing the attack to singe off a small part of his hair. The attack was incredibly fast, and it seemed like even if he was to use his shadow as a type of defense, then quite possibly it wouldn't be fast enough to block the attack. Not being able to see the rabbit clearly, but knowing where it was, Quinn lifted his hand, performing a blood swipe. The attack sent out 5 lines of red aura. Although he couldn't see where the rabbit was, at least he would be able to lure it out or quite possibly hit it, injuring it. But then, a small little black bolt could be seen running towards him. and the next second it had already gone past him. How fast is that thing? Quinn thought, but he knew for sure now he could kill it. It appeared to be a creature that mainly focused on speed, and the fact it was running away from him when it didn't run away from the other beasts could quite possibly mean it knew it wasn't strong enough to go against Quinn. Giving chase, he decided he would leave the crystals behind. Leveling up was more important than a bunch of crystals, and he quickly went to chase after the black rabbit. Wind walk. Using his boots skill, as long as he wasn't hit during the active skill, he would be able to run around 10% faster. Now that his speed was far greater than before, the effects of the boots were too. With this, he was able to keep up with the black bunny. Now getting a closer look, he could see the sparks of electricity coming off its paws as they hit the ground. Quite possibly the energy it had used for an attack was now being used to power its legs. He continued the chase until they had entered the part of the forest they were in once before, but he knew it was pointless. Their speeds right now were the same, so their distance would stay the same as well. Crescent kick, Quinn activated as he lifted his legs, sending out an attack far ahead. Performing the attack slowed him down slightly, but he was hoping it would affect the rabbit far more worse. The crescent kick was performed at a slight diagonal angle, hitting one of the large trees in front of both him and the rabbit. When it did so, the tree started to slide down and now stood in the rabbit's path. The rabbit knew it could try to go around, but its trunk was far too thick for it to hop over it, and Quinn was now upon it. Blood swipe, Quinn performed it 2 times, completely surrounding it, and he was ready for his level up that was in sight. The rabbit had accepted its fate and squinted its eyes. But then from behind the tree, a figure appeared in front of the rabbit. Blood wall. A thick red wall of aura had come up, and as Quinn's attack had hit, he had expected them to smash. Instead, though, it looked as if the blood wipe was pushing back the blood wall. Unsure of what was going to happen, the person quickly picked up the black rabbit and jumped off to the side just in time, as the blood wall had been broken by the blood swipes and continued forward into the back of the tree. "What the hell are you doing, attacking my familiar?" the person shouted. Inside the person's arms, the black rabbit was being cradled like a newborn baby. It wasn't just calmly staying there. Instead, it seemed to be shivering away. It wasn't just frightened, but terrified. "Oi, look what you did to my familiar," the person shouted. "You've completely scared her. She's frightened out her boots. She won't stop shaking." The black rabbit turned its head towards Quinn, and he wasn't sure if he was imagining it or not, but it felt like he could see a smile on its face, looking at the boy in front of him. And yes, Quinn thought boy was the correct word to describe him. He could only think that the vampire was quite young, based on his appearance. He was around the same height as Logan, while Quinn was around 178 centimeters tall, not relatively short and not quite a tall person. Both the person in front of him and Logan both came just underneath his chest. He had ash-gray hair that looked to be swept back that reminded him a little of Fex, but then the back of his hair was spiked out, as if the boy was always running through the wind, and it had gotten stuck like that. As for the clothes, it seemed like they were dressed just like any other kid that age would have done, just a dark shirt and trousers. Hey, are you ignoring me? What are you going to do about this?" the boy said. "Are you going to compensate for this crap?" Although the boy didn't sound it, he was actually being very cautious of the man standing in front of him. He hadn't moved from his spot, and if he thought he was going against a regular vampire, perhaps he would have taught them a lesson through a physical beating. The reason why he was deciding to be cautious was because his blood wall had been broken by a blood swipe. One of the most basic and weakest blood attacks a vampire could perform had shattered his blood wall. Through smell, he could tell the person in front of him wasn't a vampire noble. Although all vampires emitted a specific type of aroma or hormone that they could distinct from humans, it was slightly different with each evolution. So just how was he able to break his blood wall? That's when he decided the vampire in front of him couldn't have just been a regular vampire, but a vampire like himself. A direct descendant of one of the 13th. "Sorry," Quinn shouted back. "I didn't know that was yours. It looked interesting." The boy gritted his teeth, wanting to say something back. He wanted to snap. Interesting? He tried to kill and attack his familiar because it was interesting? Did he perhaps think it would make a tasty snack? Lately, though, he had been taking anger management classes, and he started to put it into practice, imagining his happy place. He closed his eyes and was transported into a room full of beast crystals, slowly swimming away in a pile, up and down, jumping into them like a ball pit. Ah, the life! This boy is a little strange. Putting the black rabbit down on the floor, it started to turn into a slight black mist. It began to head towards the boy's neck and eventually formed a black collar. Seeing this, Quinn realized it really was his familiar. Unlike his own, though, the boy's transformed into a physical object that could be seen just like Fex's earring. The boy started walking up to him and held out his hand. "If you are really sorry, then pay me," he said. "Give me some beast crystals, or—" He then looked to his left and looked to right, checking if there was anyone nearby. "A blood crystal if you have one of those," he whispered. While looking at the short boy, Quinn started to think back to the quest he had received to defeat the familiar. If he remembered correctly, familiars wouldn't really die. If he had killed the black rabbit, would he have gotten his instant level up? Or did the quest really mean to kill the boy, satisfying the quest? If the second one was the case, then it would be unwise for Quinn to take part. Although he felt he was stronger than the vampire in front of him, he knew nothing about the vampire or who he was. Perhaps if the boy was to go missing, they would throw a search party or would be aware someone was here attacking them. Laying low until they had gathered all the information they needed was what they had to do. "Oh, I know," Quinn said as if he had just gotten a light bulb moment. "I just saw a cave in a different area. It had tons of crystals over there." Pulling his hand back, the boy now had a scrunched-up face and was starting to sweat a little. Wait, you saw that?" "Bingo." Quinn thought this would be the case. He couldn't imagine the black rabbit caring about the crystals. After finding out it was a familiar belonging to someone else, it now made sense why it was doing what it was doing. What surprised Quinn was how well one could control a familiar to do its bidding. It is practically farming crystals for him. "I wonder if I will be able to control the bone law till the point it can do what I want." Then Quinn remembered the subtle text when reading about the bone claw, about subtle desires. Did all the familiars work like this? Maybe the boy's wish in front of him was to gather beast crystals, so that's what it was happy to do. While the bone claw was meant to complete his darkest desires, not wanting to not think about it anymore, he tried to move the question onward. "Fine," the boy shouted. "We're even, thanks for telling me about that. I'll check it out later." Although he tried to keep his voice straight, he couldn't help but allow it to shake slightly. At some point, he would have to move the crystal somewhere else. Wanting the stranger to forget about what he had seen, he tried to throw him off track. "So I'm guessing you haven't found a familiar yet. Is that why you were going after mine?" the boy asked. You don't have to beat them into submission. Familiars are cleverer than beasts. Sometimes you can just talk with them and make some type of deal. If you haven't found one now, then you don't have much time left until we have to head to class." "Class?" Quinn replied. "I'm sorry, but I'm not a middle schooler." "What?" the boy shouted. "You idiot, you thought that because I was a shrimp didn't you? You're a descendant, right? That's why you're out here looking for a familiar. It's not my fault that you didn't complete the assignment before school starts. I thought it was pretty rough of them as well, asking all of us to go out and search for a familiar." Hearing this, Quinn decided to ask the system if he knew more details, and it turned out he did. It looks as if even so much time has passed, the vampires are still doing things like they always have. The system replied, "Remember what I said earlier. Only vampire descendants and vampire leaders are permitted to have a familiar. In my time, they would often be separated from the main school most of the time, as there were different things to teach and learn. And one of the first tasks is usually asking them to seek out and find their own familiar." "Can there be more than one decadent per family?" Quinn asked. "Yes, it's quite normal for them to have many in case something happens to them. Some leaders used to not even know who were their children and who wasn't, but would just pay attention to those strongest." Thinking about this, if Fex was to have a familiar, it meant he was also a direct descendant. Not only that, but it seemed that they didn't know each other that well. Otherwise, the person in front of him would have recognized Quinn as a fraud. Instead, he assumed Quinn was also one, perhaps because of his strength. Maybe if he was to join their classes, he could see if anyone else knew any information about what exactly happened to Fex. "Actually," Quinn replied, doing as the system told him. He turned around and slightly pulled down his shirt, showing the circle marking on his back. "I already have a familiar." Oh, so you just tried killing my black rabbit for fun, I see." "I see," the boy was saying in an angry tone. If it wasn't for the fact the person in front of him knew about his stash of crystals, he would have done something by now. That was an accident. Let's start again. My name is Ben. When trying to come up with a name, Quinn didn't know why, but his head was telling him that the easier thing to do was just to place AB in front of his name. Letting out a bit of hot air from his head, the boy finally replied back. I'm Rokeen. With that, Quinn placed his hand forward, suggesting Rokeen lead the way, and the two of them headed off towards the particular training area for descendants. There was a second reason he decided to take this training up, and that was because if they told the others to just get their familiars now, then maybe he would also be able to learn how to control his. Heading back to the camp with Rokeen, there were a few things Quinn had learned about him in the short amount of time they were spending together. They still had a lot of time until they were due to arrive at the destination, so they casually walked their way there. Thinking about it, perhaps learnt wouldn't be the correct term, but Quinn definitely could say he now had some opinions of his current short companion. The first word that came to his mind when thinking about him was anger. As they were walking a few times through the forest to an unknown location as far as Quinn was concerned, Rokeen was able to find fault with a few things. And when this would happen, he was sure to let you know about it. Shouting, cursing, and sometimes just outright screaming. Even now he seemed to have found another fault. Why do I have to take part in this whole training thing anyway? Rokeen said, I already know how to use a familiar. Just let me do my assessment to become an adult vampire already. Although Quinn didn't know what he was fully talking about. He was listening carefully to see if he could catch any hints on what he was just about to walk into. Besides this, his random outburst he actually found quite entertaining. During their journey, Quinn had found out that Rokeen had had the black rabbit for a while now, and it was the reason he was able to use it so well. But whenever questions were directed towards him, he would do the best to avoid them. Still, it didn't seem Rokeen was that interested in Quinn in the first place, which was a good thing. Some descendants would naturally come across familiars as they grew up, or families would even risk forming a contract with them at a young age. Although this method was more dangerous, and had a higher chance of the familiar killing its partner. If the contract was successfully formed, they had more time to form a stronger bond. Eventually, they had gone out of the strange-looking forest and went into a more laid-out open field area. The open field looked unnatural, as it seemed to be in a perfect square shape, and all across the side, the usual forest could be seen. It was as if someone had come along and just placed a football pitch in the middle of the forest. On the open field, there looked to be several tents set up on opposite sides of the field in a row. At the end of the row was a larger tent, and standing in front of that tent was a single adult male vampire. He looked quite young, having short purple dark hair and a mole just underneath his right eye, but the look on his face was also serious, never moving, and it looked as if even a strong gust of wind wouldn't affect him. Are all the adult vampires like this? Quinn thought, as so far the only two adult vampires he had seen were Silver and this man, and they both seemed pretty serious. In front of him, a few students had gathered, some sitting on the floor, some standing around waiting. There were only about 5 or so, and Quinn and Rokeen quickly went over to join them. The others turned their heads to look at the two newcomers, but quickly turned back as if they weren't interested. Hey, it's okay. I don't like any of you sad people either, Rokeen said back to them, but they still continued to ignore him. Even if he didn't know all of them, it seemed like the few he did know didn't like him. Although Quinn could perhaps understand why the others wouldn't want to be friends with a person like him, Quinn himself never thought Rokeen wasn't that bad. He just liked to express his feelings a bit more than others, saying his moans and complaints out loudly, as if there was no filter in what should have been said in his head and what he should say on the outside. They waited, and the two now didn't say much now that the others were around, and quite honestly, Quinn was a little nervous that the instructor would find out he wasn't one of them, but according to Rokeen, it was only the first day. The system had also stated that not much information would be kept on the direct descendants on who they were or what they looked like, because of the power struggles between each of the families and the possible assassination attempts. This type of information would usually be kept secret from others, and that included the location of the training, which perhaps explained the reason why they were doing it in the middle of the forest rather than in a school. Looking at the instructors and sensing his smell, he smelled different from the others that were around them. It was a smell he had only smelt once before, and that was when Silver had come to visit him, which meant these two were at the same evolution as each other. Getting caught or being the center of attention wasn't exactly the best idea, and perhaps staying next to the unpopular loud mouth was what he needed, as others who were arriving also wished to have nothing to do with him. After waiting a few minutes, more and more students had arrived, and there were now a total of 24 students. What surprised Quinn was it didn't seem like a normal school, where everyone was the same age. It was clear that there was quite a gap. Some looked to be around 12 years of age, and not just because of their height like Rokeen, while others looked a little older around the age of 23, which meant there had to be some type of requirement that was needed for them to be invited to the training. Was it their strength? If he was to take the words of what Rokeen had said earlier, he was talking about the assessment to ascend to vampire adulthood. Perhaps that was another way of saying they were about to evolve into becoming a vampire noble. If that was the case, it meant the people around him would be some of the strongest vampires at the vampire stage, at the peak just before evolving. Seeing all the kids of different ages, Quinn started to think about himself. He was still 16, and soon in a week or so it would be his birthday, turning him into 17. He had a crazy 16th year, and he was sure he would remember it for the rest of his life, but he had been so busy with everything he had even forgotten about his birthday, and it looked like he would be spending it in a completely different world. "All right, everyone, line up," the instructor shouted. Those that were lazing around on the floor, standing slightly off to the side and a little at the back, immediately got into position, standing in a row one after another. "You were all given the briefing by your families about what you were to do before arriving today, so I will ask you all who are here, who has not been successful in acquiring a familiar?" Looking to his left and looking to his right, Quinn was waiting to see who would put their hand up. It seemed like at first they were a little reluctant to, but there were some with nervous looks on their faces, and the first person eventually raised their hand. "Don't be scared. It does not matter if you have failed this task. It was expected of you in the first place," the instructor said. After hearing this, more students started to put their hand up, and 5 eventually stepped forward, 2 boys and 3 girls. "This will be a good experience for you all," the instructor explained. "One day when you run your own families, you might have to do what we will now be doing today. For the students that haven't been able to capture a familiar out in the open, we will be summoning one and forming a contract with them, right here and right now. First, before we proceed any further, it's important I tell you all a bit about myself," the instructor shouted in a loud, booming voice. "This is so you guys know you are getting the appropriate training and you can decide for yourself whether or not I am someone worth listening to. I am Quinn Talen, Vampire Knight of the 4th family, the Talents. As you know, every year it is the duty of one of the families to send a vampire knight out to train the descendants, and this year it is the 4th family's turn, and I have chosen for these 2 months to focus on familiar training." Raising his arm straight out to his right, he kept it straight, and slowly his fingertips started to turn black, and a mist started to form until eventually, what could only be described as a demonic-looking raven appeared on the top of his hand. "This here is my familiar. Although I am no longer a descendant in line to become a leader due to becoming a vampire knight, I once was just like all of you. I have quite the experience when it comes to things like this." Snapping his finger, the raven completely disappeared in a second. It was clear he had complete control over it, something that Quinn wanted as well. He didn't even know how to summon his familiar. That would be the first step before even thinking about controlling it. The instructor Clark then pulled out a square black mat that was 1 square meter in size, and appeared to have a strange circle drawn on it in red. The circle had even more circles drawn inside, overlapping each other, and strange patterns going throughout. "A summoning circle," the system said. Although Quinn wanted to ask the system some questions, he couldn't right now as he was too focused on what the instructor was saying. For those who have not successfully been able to capture, or perhaps just weren't able to subdue a familiar, we will be trying to form a contract using this, a summoning circle. When using this, it will allow the bridge between our world and the familiar world to form a connection. Everything has already been prepared beforehand, and a single drop of blood from the one wanting to perform the summon is all you need. Once that is inserted, we will then start the contract bonding process. One of the female students then raised her hand as she heard of this. "But sir, if we could have received our familiars this way, then why did we need to go out for the last week or so hunting looking for one ourselves? Isn't this a lot easier?" she asked. "Thank you for asking the question, and I will explain," Clark said. "You see, When dropping your blood, it will show your desires and wants, sending them through to the other world. Those interested will come rushing forward at once, and the first one to arrive will form a contract. Unfortunately, the vampire has no choice. The familiars that are out here and have been in our world have had time to adapt. They understand human ways more and are more likely to be powerful. There is also the chance to choose which familiar you want based on your own skills. Besides, the stronger familiars would like to know more about you than just your blood. Sometimes familiars have other factors that they are looking for. We still do not understand everything about them. If I'm honest, it is unlikely when summoning a familiar this way that a strong one will appear. It is more likely that it will attract the desperate ones that wish to leave that place. Hearing these words, the 5 on the stage looked a little depressed but chose not to say anything. In truth, if they were to cause a fuss, then Clark would have explained further, but didn't wish to embarrass them in front of everyone if he didn't need to. The truth was, if they had been out looking for a familiar on the outside for a week and weren't able to find one, then more so than not, none of them were interested in them in the first place. A familiar was able to sense those that it might be well in tune with and will actively go out to seek one. With the explanation all done, it was time for the process to begin. The students formed a line, and a blade was used to cause a small cut on their finger, dripping it into the center of the magic circle. The circle started to light up bright red, and while this process was happening, the student would continue to mumble, "Please be a strong one. Please be a strong one." Then when the light had ended, all the students could see what had appeared. In front of him, his familiar had appeared. It was pink in color and was as large as a snake, wiggling about on the floor, but strangely it had no facial features, no eyes, no tongue. Just a pink thing wriggling about on the floor. "Hey, is that a worm?" Rokeen said quite loudly. It caused some of the other students to chuckle a little, as it really did just look like a giant worm. A familiar is not everything. Even if one is as pathetic or weak like this, you can still focus on your own skills. Clark said, "Remember, there are plenty of vampires that make it to a higher level even without a familiar." The next set of students had arrived doing the same thing one after another, and several other familiars were seen. Not all of them looked incredibly weak like the first. There was a wolf for one, a strange butterfly looking for another, and a few more. Whatever the case was, they all knew they were now stuck with these as their familiars and they could choose to use it or not. With the weaker familiars, it would be harder for them to disobey in the first place. They were just happy they were out on the outside and were unlikely to go against their master and try to kill them. Everyone went back in line and had lined up once again. "Okay, so now I wish to see all your familiars in its closed form. What I mean by this is the form it takes before it is summoned. I will be going around asking you what familiar you each have while looking at the closed form." Going around one by one, Clark would look at their closed forms. Then if they could, he would ask them to try to summon it right in front of him. He reassured everyone that it wouldn't matter if they couldn't summon it for now. It was just that usually from the closed form alone, he would have an idea what type of familiar it was. But even he hadn't seen every familiar in existence. So this way, he would be able to broaden his knowledge, trying to remember their closed forms that matched with their appearance. Quinn noticed that actually most of the students were unable to summon their familiar so far, with a few exceptions. Then it came to Rokeen's turn. Summoning the black rabbit was an easy task for him, and he had a smug look on his face as he lifted his nose up high for everyone to see. "Very good, Rokeen, as expected, and the familiar seems to like you well." Finally, standing by his side, it was Quinn's turn. The strange looks the two had given each other didn't go unnoticed by both of them, and now it felt a little awkward as the two had come face to face. "Please," Clark said. Looking around, Quinn noticed there was a girl in the row behind him, as well as one to his side, but he had no choice. His marking was on his back, just underneath where his shoulder blades would lie. The only way he could show it was by lifting up his shirt and turning around, and that's what he did. Closing his eyes out of embarrassment, Quinn was unable to see the reaction of the two girls next to him, but as they saw his perfectly crafted abs as if it was a sculpture, they started to feel themselves heat up a bit. It wasn't normal for a vampire to have such a toned body, especially one around Quinn's age, and all the girls couldn't help but try to take a peek, getting excited as they imagined running their fingers down his stomach, feeling each ab. However, the one that was most shocked out of everyone wasn't the girls, but was Instructor Clark himself. Looking at the strange circle, he knew what it was straight away. Perhaps the youngsters around didn't know because it was past their time, but he did. "Do you know what this is, and can you summon it?" "No," Quinn replied, "but I know it's a bone claw." Putting his shirt back down, the others started to whisper to themselves, trying to see if any of them had heard of it before, but it seemed like they hadn't. Of course, the old king's familiar was kept secret. Just like how one ability would give one an advantage if known, it was the same for the familiars, and only those at the very top would know. "You're a special boy," Clark said as he moved on to the next student. The word special could be interpreted in so many ways, and the others hearing this didn't really know what to make of it. So, in the end, they chose to ignore Clark's remark apart from Rokeen. This was because Rokeen had been paying special attention to the words being used by Instructor Clark, as he went around and checked everyone's familiars. In his head, he was creating some type of ranking system based on the words that would have been used, and so far the best was himself. That was until Ben got picked, and even he was struggling to interpret what the instructor meant by special. In a way, it wasn't an outright compliment. That was clear because Ben couldn't even summon his familiar. If he was to take a guess, the word special in this situation was being used to describe his potential. As Clark continued to go around, there were no better compliments given than the one to Rokeen and Ben. "Looks like your skills aren't the only strong thing, but your talent with familiars might be good as well." Damn. Maybe he was just one of those people that were gifted from the beginning, never had any problems in his life, grew up in a good family, and they decided to groom him into the perfect leader. Right now, making his own conclusion, he was a bit resentful towards Ben. Returning back to the front, Clark began to speak once again. "The first task we will be doing today is trying to summon your familiar, or at least that is the end goal. Some of you can already do this, and for others it may take weeks or even months to achieve this," Clark explained. "But even for those that already know how to do this, it will be a good exercise for you all. What I'm about to say to you all now may surprise most of you, but there is actually nothing you can do in your power to forcefully summon your familiar. They have a mind of their own, they aren't crazy animals like beasts, but they are intelligent things. If they chose to not come out and help you, then that is completely up to them. So what this first lesson will actually be about is communicating with them. For those that already know how to do this, you can get to know them better. Communication with your partner is the key for a good understanding for both of you. So now I wish for you to do as I do." As he continued to explain, Clark began to do the actions at the same time as speaking. He first sat down on the floor and asked the others to follow, crossed his legs and closed his eyes while his two hands were placed together as if one was meditating. Okay, the reason we close our eyes when doing this is to have as little distraction as possible. Visuals, sounds, and all sorts can sometimes deter you from hearing your familiar. With time, you will get better at this, and you will be able to communicate with them without this. Now in your head, picture the symbol or item on your body. Think about it, and focus on where it is on the part of your body. Then with your mind, try to speak out and reach to it. If you are successful in making communication, please raise your hand. Quinn was able to follow the steps quite easily, and his concentration was at this point almost flawless. He had pictured the symbol in his head clearly, and it was as if he was in a black room. The reason he found it so easy was because he did this every morning for the past month and a half. It was similar to his chi training routine that Leo had left him. When in the black room in his mind, slowly the mark started to turn into a type of mist, and slowly turned into the fairly large muscular figure with the long arms by its side and its dangling fingers that scraped across the floor. "Why did you choose me?" Quinn asked. There was silence between the two. "You killed the Wendigos, right? Why didn't you kill me?" Quinn asked again, hoping to get an answer. The bone claw then turned its large body around and looked straight ahead at Quinn with its dead eyes. The two stared at each other for a while, not daring to look away, until finally the mist appeared again and turned back into the same symbol that was on his back. "Looks like he won't talk to me." Opening his eyes and looking around, Quinn had expected, just like with the summoning, that most of them would have not been successful in communicating with their familiars. But he quickly realized that he was in the minority, as nearly everyone had their hand up. In fact, the only other person apart from Quinn who hadn't raised their hand was the student who had summoned the worm familiar. But soon he even raised his hand. "Teacher, although I didn't exactly speak to my worm, there were loud squishy and squashy sounds I heard coming from it. Does that count?" The student asked. "Actually, yes," Clark replied. "Although it's rare, perhaps your familiar is a little slow and does not know how to communicate in using the same language as us. When they attach themselves to us, usually they're able to naturally learn straight away, although others take some time." With this, it meant that Quinn was the only person who was unable to communicate with their familiar. "And what about you, young man?" Clark asked, interested to hear what he had to say, especially since he hadn't raised his hand. "I couldn't hear anything," Quinn replied. Quinn's reply didn't seem to shock him, or at least there was no reaction on Clark's face, so it was hard to tell based on this if it was a good or bad response. But they felt like at least they were a little better than him due to him being the only person unable to communicate with their familiar. And honestly, Quinn couldn't blame them if they did see him this way. After all, right now, he was even lower than the worm boy. With the first lesson over, Clark had told the students that they could start to set up their things in the tents by the side. If they wished, they could continue to try to communicate with the familiars as a form of practice. But he also made sure to mention to not try this too much at the beginning in case of fear of annoying them. They were just like people in the end. At times they wanted their free time, and if one was to annoy them too much, then maybe they would purposely choose to not help or communicate with you. As the students were picking a tent, Quinn decided that he would grab one next to Rokeen. Rokeen didn't say anything about this. His early detest for Ben had changed after finding out he was unable to communicate with the familiar. Perhaps his thoughts before were completely wrong. Just as the night was about to end, Clark had decided to stop just outside of Quinn's tent. "Can I speak to you inside for a second?" This didn't go unnoticed by the others, but they all thought that perhaps it had something to do with Quinn being unable to communicate with his familiar. Maybe he was going to try and give him some extra tips. "Do you mind explaining to me exactly what happened?" Clark asked. "Sure, I was in the space concentrating, and I pictured the seal in my head. I tried to communicate with him, asking him a few things. It demisted and showed me his true form. I asked it again, and nothing else was said. It just looked at me, and we stood there in silence before it went away and back into the sealed form." Hearing this, a little smile appeared on Clark's face. "You don't have to worry," Clark replied. "You probably just skipped the next 3 steps. Usually, when one is to communicate with their familiars, they still appear in their mind in their closed form. Getting them to show you their true form is something different altogether. It seems to me that your familiar just does not wish to speak with you. Not that you were unsuccessful with communicating with it, but it's up to you to make it talk to you. It will be pretty hard to find out its desires if you are unable to speak to each other. Perhaps this will take some time, maybe a few days, maybe a week, or even a few months," Clark said as he left the tent and started to head back. As he zipped the tent back up, he could see that Rokeen was listening in to everything that was heard. "Damn it!" Rokeen shouted out in jealousy and stormed off towards his tent. While he was inside, he decided to summon his little black rabbit once more. Returning to his own larger tent, Clark decided that he would look over a few things. Most of all, he was interested in finding out just which family that particular student had come from. "Oh, I forgot to ask him or their names. I will do so tomorrow," Clark thought, but while looking at the name list he noticed something. The numbers were not adding up. The number of students that were at the training space and the number on his list. There was one more than there should have been. It was the middle of the night. Even though there was not much difference between night and day here, the students were resting away. The adult vampires who had better control, and such didn't need much rest or sleep. But the young ones, including Quinn, still slept every day just like people did. Resting away, Quinn was suddenly woken up by a few trees shaking. At first it didn't bother him, as he thought he could just sleep through it. But then he could hear the sound of one of the tents unzipping from his left side. Knowing who was staying by his side, he decided to check it out and unzip his own tent. To his surprise, he could see the black rabbit that he tried to kill earlier leaving Rokeen's tent and heading back into the forest. Just as it entered the forest, Rokeen was about to head back to his own tent, but not before he saw Ben catching him in the strange act. Not wanting to get in trouble, he thought perhaps he could explain to Ben what exactly he was doing. Waving his hand towards him, Rokeen invited him into the same tent. As he stepped inside, there was a single bed on the floor and a few crystals by his pillow's side. Sitting on the floor, he started to explain himself. "So, what were you doing exactly?" Quinn asked. "Look, I wasn't doing anything bad. I was just using our spare time to collect crystals, and my familiar helps me. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Just if Clark the instructor was to find out, he might tell me to stop since we're technically not meant to be doing these sort of things." Seeing the crystals by the side of his pillow, Quinn was starting to understand. The rustling noises was the black rabbit coming back and forth, most likely moving the crystals here to the cave that he found earlier, his secret stash. The real question, though, was why? Why did someone need so many crystals? "Okay, don't worry too much. I won't tell Clark," Quinn replied. "Thank you," Rokeen said with a relieved look on his face. It seemed like if he was to stop doing what he was doing, it would have really affected him. "But let me ask, why are you so crazy about beast crystals?" Quinn asked, thinking that maybe there was something he knew or there was a use for it that perhaps he could use for himself. "This might sound stupid, right? But don't laugh," Rokeen said. "I'm trying to save up so I can eventually leave this place, so I can have a life outside. I don't want to be here with everyone else." This was something big on his chest, something he wanted to tell someone desperate for so long, and finally telling someone it felt good. "You know, I'm from the fourth family, so you probably know we have the crappy ability to talk to animals and beasts. The other families always laughed at us, and there has never been a king selected from the fourth family. I hear there is even a human ability that allows them to control animals and beasts, so what's the use of talking to them? So you see, I'm not gifted or anything. The reason I could and always have been able to get a familiar is because of my ability. Because of this, the other kids who know about this chose to ignore me, making me feel like I'm someone from one of the tent's family." It was clear he had been holding in these feelings for a long time. It was perhaps the reason why he was always angry all the time. All these feelings inside were bottling up, and he was releasing it out by shouting all the time. "You know, it's funny," Rokeen started again. "The hatred, the ignoring, always seemed to shift. At first it was the Force family, then the Tents, and then because of what happened with Fex, now everyone seems to hate the 13th family. Why does there always have to be one? Why can't we all just get along?" The questions Rokeen was asking now. Quinn himself used to ask the same questions every day through his school life. It didn't make sense to him, and eventually he wanted to change all that. The other thing that Quinn was interested in was hearing the name Fex, but now was not the right time to ask about him. However, it seemed like what he had done had not only affected himself, but those involved in his family based on Rokeen's remarks. The two sat there in quiet for a while, allowing Rokeen to calm down a little. Quinn wanted to say things to comfort him, but once being in the same position before, he knew that the words would do nothing. No matter how much someone said they understood how you felt, it never felt real. Suddenly, Rokeen grabbed his neck, and he felt like he was slightly choking as he fell to the floor. "What's happening? Are you okay?" Quinn said, panicking, not knowing what to do. After a few seconds, it seemed like Rokeen was now okay as he lifted himself off the floor and he could breathe again. He continually touched his neck where his collar would usually stay, and a stunned look was on his face. "My familiar," he said. "Someone's killed my familiar." With the link in place, even though familiars couldn't technically die as long as their partner was alive, they could still feel part of the pain and loss. It would be some time before Rokeen would be able to summon him again. While thinking of the possibilities of what might have happened, a few boys' laughter could be heard outside. Both Quinn and Rokeen immediately rushed outside and could see the three boys coming out from the edge of the forest. The one in front had a crystal in his hand, and he was freely chucking it up and down, catching it as he walked. "That felt great," the boy at the front said. "I thought it would be a bit harder, but you," Rokeen shouted as he ran as fast as he could up to them. "You killed my familiar, and that's my—" But he stopped himself before claiming the crystal was his. The loud noise had caused the others who were still sleeping to wake up and come out of their tents, taking a look at the commotion that was brewing outside. Quinn, seeing that things could get nasty, especially since there were three of them and only one of him, now standing by his side, he felt like he could back him up. He didn't know why, but he wanted to help Rokeen, perhaps because he reminded him so much of himself when he was younger. The dreams he had weren't crazy or far-fetched, He just needed people by his side to prove that they could happen. "Oh yeah, so do you have any proof that I did this?" the boy said as he continued to laugh with the other two behind him. The student that was laughing was called Sirius, and he was one of the few descendants that nearly all of them knew. A direct descendant of the first family. Quite possibly the current strongest family out of all the 13. Not only that, he had a reputation already for being a serious troublemaker, and not one like Fex who would just get into mischief. With his eyebrows furrowed and scorning at him, Quinn could see Rokeen wanted to do something, but he was holding back. Placing 2 fingers in his mouth, he blew. At first Quinn thought he would hear a whistle, but could hear nothing. Then in the next second, a bird flew from the forest in the direction that the boys had come from and landed on the top of his head. "Did this person kill a little black rabbit?" Rokeen said, pointing at Cyrus. "Caw!" The bird squawked and flapped its wings. "Haha, you idiot. Just cause you can understand them doesn't mean we can as well." Cyrus replied. 1 caw for yes, 2 for no, do you understand? Rokeen asked. "Caw. Is this person a boy?" "Caw. Is he a girl?" "Caw, caw. Are there 4 boys in front of me?" "Caw, caw." "I think you get the point. This bird is a lot smarter than you. Although your brain might be bigger, it doesn't mean it's better," Rokeen said. At this point, the confrontation had gotten too interesting for the other students that they were now all out of their tents watching what was going on. "Hey, as long as your bird doesn't speak English, you can't prove jack. For all we know, you're using your crappy ability on it." For a brief second, Rokeen looked around hoping that anyone, maybe someone would come to his aid, but why would they? Clenching his fist, he hated that he couldn't change the situation he was in. Then the sound of a few footsteps from his side was heard pressing against the grass. "Tell him, did you kill his familiar, the little black rabbit?" Quinn asked, walking towards them. With each step, his heart was pumping and his blood was boiling. The type of people in front of him now he hated the most. "Who the hell are you?" Cyrus said, as he was about to laugh at his friends at this joker coming towards him. "You'll listen to what I say." The next second his eyes glowed red as he shouted his command. "Sit." In nearly an instant, as if his body had lost control, Cyrus was down on the floor, sitting down. The others had to take a second look at what they were just seeing in front of them. They even rubbed their eyes, a few of them, but still the sight in front of them was the same. In a way, the others saw Cyrus as a terror. Not quite a bully, but because of his status, he was able to chuck his weight around without getting in trouble. He received privileges that the others didn't receive, even though they were all direct descendants themselves. And right now, a vampire they had never seen or heard of before had made him obey him with a single word. It wasn't the fact that this was impossible to do, but the fact that another normal vampire was the one that had done it. In their minds, every vampire here was at the top level, the best of the best, and on the brink of breaking through and evolving to the next stage. As for Cyrus, he was closer than any of them right now. In a way, the scene they were watching in front of them should not be happening in any normal circumstance. Sitting down on his knees, Cyrus's face was in a constant struggle, as if it was battling against something inside him. "What is this? Why can't I move?" Sirius thought to himself as he tried lifting his legs off the ground. Then when looking up, all he could see was the red rings around Quinn's eyes. Is it because of this nobody? Is he using his influence skill? Watching on the sidelines, the students started to think about one thing. Who was this mysterious vampire? Yes, they all didn't mingle or talk with each other due to being from separate families, but if there was some seriously this strong, surely they should have heard of him. Word still got around after all. "Do you know his name?" one asked. "No, but I did see him hanging around with Rokeen earlier. Maybe they are from the same family." "You're right, the 4th, Dream On, but you are right. Just what family is he from?" Too filled with emotions of what he was doing right now, Quinn wasn't paying attention to the words that were being said behind him. What he did not want to do was to stand out, and that was the very thing he was doing now. Still, he wasn't entirely sure if his influence skill would work, but after Silver had done it to him, it was something he wanted to try out. "Now explain," Quinn said with his eyes still glowing red. "Did you kill Rokeen's familiar?" Once again, no amount of fighting back was helping Sirius. He couldn't even resist. This had gone way beyond what any normal vampire could do. Yes, when we saw the black rabbit after noticing it belonged to Rokeen, we decided to follow it, and then we saw the crystal it was holding. The others trapped it while I killed it. Sirius answered. Now, tell me why you did it, Quinn asked while looking at Rokeen behind him. By this point, Quinn had a good idea why people chose to do certain things, and he wanted Rokeen to hear it to gain confidence in himself. Because I was jealous, Cyrus replied. Hearing the first words, Rokeen couldn't believe it. Why would Sirius need to be jealous of him? He was the best descendant, well known by everyone, while everyone else treated him like crap. I saw the way Instructor Clark praised him, how easy he was able to control and talk to his familiar. I didn't understand how he could easily do something that I couldn't. With the answer to everything said and done, and the proof they needed, Quinn canceled his influence skill and turned to look at Rokeen with a smile on his face. Did he do that for me? But why? We barely even know each other. As he thought about these things, a lump was felt forming in his throat, and he felt like his heart was truly touched. A tear started to roll off from his cheek and onto the floor. Now Rokeen was hating himself for his previous thoughts. There were many times when he wanted someone to just help him, but they never ever came. Then the person he spoke bad about behind his back, the one he thought was just like the others, had helped him out, even though they didn't know each other that well. This was what had hurt him the most, the fact that he had judged Ben so early on without knowing him. Now that Cyrus had complete control over his body, he was filled with rage and Quinn's back was turned. There was a simple way for one to block the influence skill in the first place, and that was to not look directly in their eyes. You little twerp, Cyrus shouted as he jumped off his 2 feet and propelled himself off of the ground. He had used so much force that the mud and grass beneath his feet had been kicked up. To everyone else, the speed they saw him leap from the ground was something that some of them could only dream of, but for Quinn, he could hear, sense, and tell every movement as soon as he started. Should I dodge the attack, or maybe just let him hit me? While thinking about what to do to not make him stand out so much, he could sense something else happening and realized there was no need for him to do anything. Sirius' fist had been stopped, and Instructor Clark held it in his hand. While I am here, there will be no fighting between my students unless I say so. All of you go back to your tents and get some sleep. As for you two, come with me and explain what happened. But sir, it wasn't Ben's fault. It was all because of Cyrus. Rokeen tried to explain. So the student's name is Ben, huh? Clark thought as he took the students away and ordered the rest to go sleep. When they arrived, he had both of them tell their sides of the story, letting Cyrus go first, but Sirius had mentioned nothing about Quinn using the influence skill on him due to embarrassment, but said that they had accused him of some wrongdoings he was a part of. When Quinn told his side, he also chose to not mention the influence skill being used and just explained how he was helping Rokeen get to the truth. In the end, Clark felt like he had heard enough. It seemed like the only person that was hurt by this was Rokeen. He took the crystal from Cyrus and kept it for himself while telling the two of them to return to their rooms, reminding them to not get in any more trouble. As soon as the two of them had left the room, Clark looked at the name list once more, looking for the student known as Ben, and it turned out that he was the one student that wasn't on the list. He lied back in his chair and started to think about what to do for a while. In truth, something like this would have usually been reported. Although only descendants and family leaders were allowed familiars, it wasn't such a big deal if another vampire had one. There were times when out that a familiar would become attached to a certain vampire, and they couldn't exactly say it was their fault. But there was a chance that because Ben wasn't on the list that he also wasn't a direct descendant. If this was the case, then most likely he would be kicked off the current course. This was why Clark was having so much trouble trying to decide what to do. He loved nearly everything about familiars, which was why he had designed his course around them. For him, he had never seen a bone claw before and had only heard of it. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him to find out what one looked like, and he wanted to see Ben grow. Why did the bone claw choose him? Interested him greatly, so for now, he would allow him to stay. The training at the Descendants camp continued for a week. During that time, Quinn continued to learn everything he could about families and took part in the lessons as much as possible. On top of this, he tried his best to find out any information about Fex. There were quite a few people that seemed to have known him quite well and knew who he was. Even those that didn't know him now knew he had done something bad. The rumor that he would be severely punished had been passed around. As for what he had done, or what exactly he would be getting as a punishment, the others weren't completely clear on that. As for the familiar training he had taken part in, the other students had learned quickly. All of them could now summon their familiars at least. As for controlling them or learning what special abilities they had, it was a hit or miss. Still, there was one student who had never succeeded in a summoning during the whole time, and that was Quinn. Apart from the first day, he never saw the bone claw again in his mind, and it seemed like it didn't want to communicate or help him anymore. Perhaps the others might have teased or made fun of him for something like this, but after the events of what had happened to Cyrus, him and the others made sure to stay clear of Quinn. All apart from Rokeen. Ever since that day, Rokeen wished to help Quinn as much as possible, trying to give him tips and such when it came to communicating and talking with your familiar, but nothing was working. Still, the two of them had gotten closer in a short amount of time, being the only ones that continued to hang around with each other. Today, Clark had told everyone he had a special announcement to make in a few minutes. They were told to pack their items and to meet him out front of the large tent. Although Quinn would be turning up for this, he had already decided it would be his last day before he wasted his time here. He had made no progress with his familiar, and he wasn't getting any EXP, so it felt like he was only wasting his time. He had yet to tell Rokeen about this, and decided it was best not to anyway. Inside one of the tents, Cyrus was standing up, pacing up and down in the small space. He often did this daily as he was anxious about something. The events of that night had really affected his mind, and he just wished to purge that memory, but it was impossible every time he looked at Quinn. A shiver would be sent down his spine, and the image of the red, glowing eyes would pop into his head, how he had become so helpless and weak at the time. The zipper to his tent was unzipped, and the two boys that were usually by his side stepped into the tent. "Anything?" Cyrus asked. "It's the same today," one of the boys replied. Not one person knows what family he belongs to. They all said they had never seen him before, around the castle or the nearby area. That leaves a few options. He belongs to the 4th family like Rokeen, and that's why they are so close. The 13th family had a secret descendant apart from Silver and Fex that no one knew about, or finally, the most unlikely of the three. He is a descendant of the 10th family, but that wouldn't make much sense unless the rumors about the leader coming back were true. The boys didn't for a second think of the fact that Quinn might have been an outsider or not even one of the descendants from the 13 families. They just thought he was so powerful that he had to be one of them. Well, if my guess is right about why Clark called us today, then there might be a chance for us to do something then. A few minutes later, all of the students had gathered outside and stood in front of the large tent, standing in 2 rows. It had been a while since they had done this and been so formal, and the last time was during the first day, so they were a little nervous about what Clark was going to say. "Okay, everyone." Clark started to speak. "Although it has only been a week, and we still have plenty of time left, honestly, there isn't much else for me to teach you about familiars. With everything I have already taught you, you should now have a stable foundation to continue to grow and control that. You guys are fast learners. While there are rumors of this current generation of vampires being the worst we have ever had, I would not include you lot in that bunch. You are probably one of the best bunch of vampires that I have taught." "Wait, aren't we the only vampires he has ever taught? It's his first time, right?" a girl whispered, realizing that his words didn't really hold that much weight. "Anyway," Clark continued, ignoring the words of the others. "Because of this, I sent in a special request, and the council has agreed to push things forward for all of you. Today you will all be taking part in the vampire assessment. Due to your status, you will take this earlier than the regular vampires. You are stronger and closer to the evolution point than them. The task is a simple one. Everyone here will be transported to a different planet. On this planet, there are advanced tier beasts called death bats. You must kill 10 of them each and bring back the crystal within. The crystals will be used to make your first light ring, which will be your proof that you have passed the assessment. Don't worry if you fail the task. Your life is more important than anything. From this point onward, you will be allowed to take the assessment whenever you wish." Then, pulling out one of the square teleporters from behind, it was placed on the floor. The contraption sprung open, and a square portal had been opened. If Quinn was to remember correctly, the death bat crystals that were mentioned were the ones used to create the light ring in his inventory, and they were also only creatures found on a planet he had been onto once before. It was his first ever red portal planet. Although he planned to leave, he was now having second thoughts. One, he never expected to be asked to go to another planet right now. He had planned to leave in the middle of the night after today, but it looked like they would all be transported soon. As for the second reason, Quinn actually thought it would be good if he fought against the death bats. He should be more than strong enough to take them, and he should also get the first EXP kill for the bats. Also, after giving away his own ring, making a new one would be helpful for when he returned back to the Earth. Because of these reasons, he decided he would go along. "Okay, is everyone ready?" Clark asked. The others looked nervous while some looked excited. They had been waiting for this for a long time now. As for Rokeen, who was standing next to Quinn, his knees were shaking, and it looked like he would collapse at any moment now. "Hey Ben, you'll stay with me, right? After all, if we take them on together, this can be easy for both of us. Who knows? Maybe I can talk to the beast and just ask them to let us kill them," Rokeen said. Hearing this, Quinn just smiled back and nodded. He didn't care as long as he got his EXP, and if he was to level up and start the evolving process on the planet, it wouldn't be so strange, since all the vampires around him were at the breaking point. Finally, students started to enter the portal one by one, and eventually Quinn and Rokeen did too. After all the students had entered, Clark himself was the last one to follow them. "Ben, time to find out who you are," he said, jumping through the portal. A week or so had passed since Logan, Vorden, and CIA had joined the regular vampire classes. So far with their teacher Silver, they had gone through some interesting things. The first problem they often faced was that the students were given blood at the canteen to consume 2 days a week. They were able to get by and avoided drinking the blood packs by either saying they were saving it for later or giving it to someone else, and even pretending to drink the drinks. This just made Vorden realize how silly he was on the first day when he had consumed the blood. There were many things he could have done to avoid such a situation, and usually he was quick on his feet when thinking about things like this. The problem was the situation was so different to what he was used to that even he was being affected and couldn't think straight. The next set of problems they had faced were the classes they had to attend. The theory classes were interesting, and it was nice that Silver started from the beginning, so they were able to learn what the vampire pool was, about the 13 families, the Vampire King, and what they all did. Still, nothing was really explained about the 10th family and their past. There was no history lesson on the vampire's past, as if it was something they wanted to forget, and also nothing was mentioned about the extra empty castle on the other side. When Logan was trying to gather information, it seemed like none of the other vampire kids knew what the castle was used for either. The problem came when they needed to take physical activity lessons. One of the first ones was learning the skill blood swipe. Of course, the others weren't able to do this and would never be able to do this because they just weren't vampires. They would try their best to imitate the others, swinging their arms and then faking their anger when it didn't work. Of course, the other vampires laughed and mocked them, but it wasn't seen too much of a big deal. That was because they were in the 10th family. As Logan had suspected, saying they were in the 10th family was a blessing in disguise. Although they were mocked and teased as such, they weren't really hit or punched just for being weaker like back at their school. As for Xander, just as Silver had said, she was looking out for Logan and the students that belonged to the 13th. Xander didn't really get the chance to mess with Vorden. A few of the other vampire classes continued like this, and they managed to get by the physical ones without much trouble. All they had to do was try to imitate the others, but they were all starting to wonder how much longer they could stay there. It was okay to be like this for the first week, but it would only be a matter of time before they were caught. There was no further information on Fex. It seemed it was best if they could get out of there. "Today our practical lesson will be a bit different than usual," Silver said, standing at the front of the class. "We will be doing something called joint exercises with the other campuses. When fighting or in trouble, you won't always have another vampire by your side. There are also those in the subclasses there to help you. There are different subclasses even within the categories, so it's important you know what each of them do and how they act. So today, we will begin to do some joint exercises with the C campus on the outside front field." "Yes," CIA shouted out of happiness. The others around her looked at her for a second, before she slowly looked around and started to sit back down in her seat. If it was any other situation, she would have been embarrassed, but she didn't care. She was just over the moon that she would be seeing Layla again. Lately, her mind had been feeling worse than it did before, especially since she had been mulling over the fact that the people that had brought her to this world were the ones that might have removed her memories in the first place. But if anyone might tell her the truth, she thought she would be able to reach out to Layla. It might be a good time to talk to her to see if she has found anything out, Logan thought, and try to find a way out from here. Quinn should have escaped from that mountain a while ago. He tried to contact us using the mask, but it looks like we missed it. With the explanation done, 3 classes each from the vampire side were sent to stand in front of the different campuses. For today, 2 classes would head to work with Category A, then 2 classes sent for Category B, and the final 2 classes sent to work with Category C. When they arrived outside, it looked like their class was doing activities with an old friend, as Vorden's eyes and Xander's eyes managed to meet each other. He's still upset over this little thing. What's with people holding grudges? Vorden thought. Ha, ha. Ratton started laughing hysterically. Like you're one to talk. Silver and Paul met up and quickly shook hands as the class would begin, and Paul was left to do the explaining. So first, as you can see, there are an even amount of vampires to subclasses of the C class. So what I will want you to do in a moment is get into pairs with each other. I want the 2 of you to get to know each other. Explain your abilities, your strengths, weaknesses, things you have learned over the past week. Paul said, once we have passed this stage, we will then move on to the next. So, please go ahead and find your partner. Immediately, there was a rush from the thirsty vampires to go ahead and talk to the girls from the sub-C classes. Some of them already knew who they wanted to team up with, and some chose to stay with those that they knew and were from their family. As for CIA, the whole time she only had one person in her sight. As soon as they were allowed to move, she was ready to sprint over to Layla. However, the second they were allowed to pair up, a cloud of black figures in her eyesight had gone flying past her and stopped directly where Layla was. They surrounded her, and it looked like CIA was unable to even barge in. Please be my partner, one of the boys said. I'm the strongest vampire of my class. I think we will make a great couple, partner. Another fumbled over their words. As for Logan, a strange, big-eyed, tan-brown girl with bushy hair had come towards him and said nothing. She then just put his hand into his and stayed there in place. For some reason, Logan preferred it this way. There was no communication and no hassle. Someone out of the blue had just chosen to be with him. As for Vorden, he could see everything happening. What they needed to do was to get one of them to team up with Layla, so they were able to get more information. He could see CIA struggling, as she couldn't get past the wall of boys. So instead, he decided to walk over, but not before Amy, the blonde-headed girl, had blocked his path. Where are you going, bad boy? She said. You're staying with me. Her tail flicked fast in the wind, but she noticed his eyes were never looking at her for even a second, but was looking past her at Layla. What a lucky girl to have such a caring boy. She thought. Move out of the way, a voice said from behind the crowd. Most of the boys chose to ignore it, continuing to try and persuade Layla, but one of them at the very back had turned and could see who it was. Hey, the boy whispered. Let's go, it's Xander. Once they found out who had told them to go away, the boys decided to split up and leave. Seeing this and ignoring what was going on, CIA felt like it was her chance, and she immediately started running towards Layla once again. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Xander turned around and looked CIA straight in the eye. Stay, he shouted, and immediately her whole body was frozen. She felt like she couldn't move. What is this? Arg my head. What's wrong? Why does it hurt so much? Even though she was in pain and wanted to move, she couldn't even lift her hand to place on her aching head. Do you remember me? Xander said, walking towards Layla. I want you to be my partner. As you can see, it looks like you have no other choice, he said with a creepy smile. Layla wanted to use her spiritual chains there, and then once again, but honestly, he had done nothing wrong, and it looked like the others had already gotten partners. He wouldn't be able to do anything while the teachers are here, right? She thought as she felt like she had no choice but to accept. I want to be her partner, a voice said, and turning his head, Xander could see Vorden walking towards him. Again, do you people never learn? Stay, he shouted. But, not even for a brief second, did Xander's influence skill work on Vorden as he continued to walk forward. Stop, Xander shouted out again, this time louder with his eyes glowing even fiercer, but still it didn't seem to slow down Vorden's advance. Instead, it just made it so all the students who weren't paying attention before were now looking in the direction of the others. Why isn't it doing anything? Xander thought. He knew he wasn't anything special when compared to the direct descendants. But this was the class from all the regular vampires. Everyone who was somebody was well known and had already been scouted to enter a family. Even if his influence skill wouldn't work on stopping someone completely, it should have at least had an effect on a known name like the person in front of him. Yet, for some reason he hadn't even flinched or even slowed down for a second, as if it had no effect on him at all. As if the person's mind in front of him was impenetrable. Then, when the two of them were close enough, Vorden strangely leaned in and put his face right up to Xander's. Your crappy skills won't work on me, because my mind is already broken. Lifting his hand upward, he shoved Xander to the side as he continued to walk towards Layla. The shove wasn't hard. The person had done nothing to Xander, but just because his influence skill had failed him completely, he was sweating in fear right now. Lately, too many unexpected things were happening to him. Perhaps it was best for him to stay out of it. You've had your fun now, Radin, so let's switch, said Vorden, standing by the chair in the black room. What you did was a little risky. I know you're stronger than me, but remember we don't have any abilities here. It would be a hard fight against a vampire. PFT, you need to learn to read people better. Radin replied. That person won't ever try to mess with you after this. He's broken and fine, I'll switch. But I don't know why you like this softy. The blondie before was a lot better. Wait, Xander shouted. He had somehow managed to pluck up the courage, as there was still something he had that this person couldn't have. He had done his research into the student who had tried to stop him before, and he knew he belonged to the 10th family. Working with them, every vampire, and even the subclasses knew there was no future. Compared to himself, who was close with the first family. Are you sure you want to team up with him? I think you might change your mind. You see, that boy there is from the 10th family. Some of those who were watching around gasped, as if they were watching some type of drama show. Since the scene in front of them hadn't turned violent yet, Silver and Paul decided to continue to let the spectacle go on for now. At the end of the day, what they did was their choice, and perhaps this was something they would come across in the future. Why do I care about that? Layla replied. Even if he was human, I would choose him 100 times over you. Although she didn't know it, these words were a low blow to a vampire's pride, who often saw themselves as superior beings to humans. The words made him feel as if he had been stabbed in the heart, and he fell to his knees. Okay, show's over. Everyone quickly get into your pairs, Phil said, clapping his hands. Everyone quickly moved into place, and Amy in the end had ended up with CIA as her partner. Both of you go into an empty space. This is more for the vampires to learn about you than the C classes. Tell them everything you know, perhaps show them some skills, and introduce yourselves to the person next to you. Paul explained. Then we can move on to the next step. As Layla and Vorden got into their own space far away from Xander, the others tried to move so they were relatively close to them as well. This was especially the case for CIA. This didn't go unnoticed by Amy. Hey, you don't happen to swing the other way, do you? Amy asked, with her tail pointing in the direction of Layla. That girl is so lucky to have so many people after her. I thought I was a beauty, but it turns out people don't like this these days, she said, placing her hands on her chest and lifting them up and down. It was clear Amy was a confident and bold person. It wasn't the fact that she was ugly. In fact, many people would have considered her a beauty, but sometimes her confidence and her pushiness would scare guys away. Hearing these comments, CIA's face had gone bright red. No, it's not that. She's just the only person I really know from here. Hearing these words and what the blonde boy from before had said, Amy was starting to wonder if all of them were from the 10th family. It would explain why at times Layla seemed to be a bit on edge or out of place, and knew far less than the standard person, but if that was the case, she was starting to wonder who was her turner. Normal vampires were not really allowed to turn people without permission, so it couldn't be the girl or the other two in front of her. Then the confidence and memory of the blonde boy was struck in her head, and how he managed to resist Xander's influence skill. These things weren't normal for people from the 10th to do. Is something happening over there? She thought as she looked in the direction of the 10th castle. She couldn't shake the feeling that very soon something big was happening, and it could have something to do with the rumors about the 10th's return. Thank you. Layla said as she gave a warm-hearted smile towards Logan. She started to think about the two of their relationships from the start. It had truly gotten off on the wrong foot. In fact, when they first met, Vorden strangled her up against the wall, and she had stabbed him in the thigh with an arrow. And here he was now protecting her. The world truly worked in strange ways. Don't worry, we need to look out for each other. Vorden replied. Did you manage to find anything out about Fex? Layla started to explain what had happened during her week. She knew of Fex, and it seemed like the others did too, but not what he had done. It seemed like it was the same everywhere. She then went on to also explain what she had been doing the last week, and how much she had learned. This included controlling her emotions. She no longer felt the need to have sudden outbursts here and there, and could harness that energy for herself. This allowed her to call upon her attacks if need be. Still, if she truly wanted to evolve into the next stage, she would need to try to control this better or even use a strong outside source. This includes the negative emotions of people like CIA. Still, even after all her training, she had yet to evolve into the next stage once, but Phil constantly told her it would be something that would take some time, especially depending how long she had been Hanema for. After hearing everything, Vorden had a list of what had happened so far. We think we've spent enough time here, and since we can't find anything out about Fex, we are thinking of leaving soon. In the next few days or so. If you can, try to contact us somewhere alone at night, and use the mask, and we can give you further details then. For a second, Layla looked around her and looked at Amy and the others. She thought back to her time and how much she had learned so far. She then took in a deep breath before saying her next few words out loud. No, I want to stay here.